Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started. I would like to welcome you to the August 18th, 2023 California Board of Behavioral Sciences meeting. My name is Chris Jones. I'm the chairperson of the board. Before we convene, I would like to remind everyone present that the board is a consumer protection agency charged with administering and enforcing the board's laws. When protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. The Board of Behavioral Sciences will be holding this public meeting in person and via the WebEx platform. I will announce when we're accepting public comment on the various issues. For each public comment period, we will first be accepting comments from the participants in the audience present in the room. Then the moderator will open the lines as appropriate so that the remote audience members can comment. Each participant will have 2 minutes to comment. Moderator, would you please provide the audience with instructions on how they may participate during the meeting at the appropriate times?
Certainly. When the public comment is open, anyone logged into WebEx may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon. They may look for a question mark icon, click that, type the word comment and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. We will take commenters in the order requested, and each person will have 2 minutes with a 15-second warning. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, during the roll call, please introduce yourself and let the public know whether you are a public or licensed member. Christina, please call roll to establish the quorum.
Good morning. Dr. Annette Walker,
Present, Dr. Annette Walker, Public Board Member.
Susan Friedman,
Present, Susan Friedman, public member.
Max Disposti,
Present, public member. Thank you.
John Sovek,
Present, LMFT, pronouns he, him.
Wendy Strack,
Present, public member.
Christopher Jones,
Present, board chair and LEP member.
Kelly Ronasinghe,
Present, public member.
Abigail Ortega,
Present, LCSW member.
Eleanor Uribe,
Present, LCSW member.
and for the record, the following members are absent today: Nick Boyd, Amy Eng, Justin Huft, Yvette Caceres Willis. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we begin, I want to remind all speakers to please remain on topic when making comments on the agenda items. This is a full day, and I want to make sure that we get to all agenda items. We will be taking a lunch break around 11:30, depending on where we are in our discussion. Please note that items 25 and 26 will not be discussed today. Next item is introductions. Board staff, would you please introduce yourselves? Thank you.
Roseanne Helms, Legislative Manager for the board.
Steve Sodergren, Executive Officer for the board.
Sabina Knight, Legal Counsel for the board.
And good morning, everyone. Marlon McManus, Assistant Executive Officer for the board.
Excellent, thank you. Now it's time for the public to introduce themselves if they'd like. This is voluntary. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to introduce themselves? No pressure.
Good morning, board. My name is Kimberly Wormsley. I'm the new executive director of the National Association of Social Work, so California chapter. So I'm excited to be here and thank you all for what you do.
Welcome.
Good morning, Rebecca Gonzalez, NASW California.
Welcome.
Good morning, Ben Caldwell, licensed marriage and family therapist.
Hello, my name is John DeLine, and I am a marriage and family therapist student.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone in our remote audience that would like to introduce themselves? Moderator, would you please open the lines?
Certainly. If anyone would like to introduce themselves, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand, or you may look for the question mark icon and type the word comment into that text box and click send. Would anyone like to introduce themselves? And we do have a request to introduce from Roger Smith. Roger, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 2 minutes. You're unmuted.
Association for Marriage and Family Therapy.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do not see any other requests for comment. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next on our agenda is the possible approval of the May 4th and 5th and June 8th board meeting minutes. Do any of our members wish to remove or correct any items from the meeting minutes?
I'd like to note there is a correction noted on item 11A, page 24, line 36, the typographical error.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the May 4th, 5th, and June 8th, 2023 board meeting minutes
And that will be approve the May minutes as amended.
as amended? Sorry, yes.
I'll move a motion.
Would second it.
All right, thank you, Max and Eleanor. Are there any comments from the participants from the public? Nope. All right. Are there any comments from our remote participants? Moderator, would you open the lines?
We have opened up the WebEx Q&A and public comment feature. If anyone has any comment on the minutes, you are welcome to raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, or if you see the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment and click send. Our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Any comments on the minutes? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional board member comments? All right, Christine, would you please take the vote?
Eleanor Uribe,
Yes.
Abigail Ortega,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasingi,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Wendy Strack,
Yes.
John Sovic,
Yes.
Max Disposti.
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Annette Walker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the board chair report. I would like to introduce our new board members, although they're not physically here. I am very happy to report that we do have 2 new board members that will be joining us at our next meeting in November. Amy Eng was appointed by the Assembly and will be serving as a public member. And Nick Boyd was appointed by the governor and will be serving as the board's licensed professional clinical counsel member. I do look forward to a full introduction from them at our next board meeting. We have a reappointment. I'm very happy to announce that Wendy Strack, our board vice chair, has been reappointed by the governor to serve as a public member. And now the next item is our board member attendance. This report shows the board member attendance for board meetings and committee meetings during the last fiscal year. Please let staff know if there are any errors. As a reminder, attendance at board and committee meetings is very important. Future board meetings, you'll see in the materials the list of all the upcoming board meetings. Please note that the September 21st, 2023 meeting that was scheduled for petitioner hearings has been canceled since we are all up to date on our petitioner hearings. Next, we have some staff recognitions. I would like to congratulate our BBS staff members for achieving milestones in their careers. First, we have Sabrina Barrera Ibarra, is an enforcement analyst with the Discipline and Probation Team. She is celebrating 10 years of state service. She's not here. Okay, thank you, Sabrina. They're not here. Okay, all right. We have Julie Weddle, is an enforcement analyst with the board's consumer complaint team and is celebrating 10 years of state service. Thank you, Julie. And we have Valerie Enlow, did I say that correctly? All right, is a licensing evaluator and the LPCC expert on the board licensee team. Valerie is celebrating 20 years of state service. Valerie has been with the board for more than 8 years. Congratulations to all of you and thank you all for your hard work and dedication to the board. All right, yes. Now there's one last item. We would like to acknowledge 2 board members for their service to the state of California and the Board of Behavioral Sciences. Ross Ehrlich and Max Disposti's terms with the board expired on June 30th, 2023. While Ross's position has been filled, Max has graciously offered to keep working with us
I was
until his grace period ends or a new member is appointed. I have two resolutions that I would like to present. Do I need the thing with me? We'll do Ross's first. It's not here. Oh, I've got, yeah.
Is it diamond?
It's the same. Okay. Actually, you want to hold it up for us there for the camera? Excellent. All right. Ross Ehrlich, whereas Ross Ehrlich faithfully served as a member for the the California State Board of Behavioral Sciences from February 6, 2020 to June 1st, 2023. And whereas throughout his years of service, he gave fully of himself and his ideas and acted forthrightly and conscientiously, always with the public interest and welfare in mind. And whereas he discharged these important responsibilities in a manner reflecting great credit upon himself and the board, and whereas his colleagues wish to express to him their high esteem and regard, now therefore be it resolved this 18th day of August 2023 that the members of the California State Board of Behavioral Sciences express heartfelt appreciation to Ross Ehrlich for the outstanding contribution he made during his term of service to the board. Thank you, Ross. All right, and we have one more.
Yeah.
It's with great pleasure that I give this resolution. Whereas Massimiliano Max.
I knew that was
Disposti
coming.
Faithfully served as a member for the California State Board of Behavioral Sciences from March 8th, 2016 to August 18th, 2023. And whereas Mr. Disposti faithfully served as chair of the board from June 5th, 2020 to May 31st, 2023, and served as vice chair of the board from May 11th, 2018 to June 4th, 2020. And whereas Mr. Disposti faithfully served as a member of the Policy and Advocacy Committee, and whereas throughout his years of service, he gave fully of himself and his ideas and acted forthrightly and conscientiously, always with the public interest and welfare in mind, and whereas he discharged these important responsibilities in a manner reflecting great credit upon himself and the board, and whereas his colleagues wish to express to him their high esteem and regard, now therefore be it resolved this 18th day of August 2023 that the members of the California State Board of Behavioral Sciences express heartfelt appreciation to Massimiliano Max Disposti for the outstanding contribution he made during his term of service to the board. Thank you, Max.
Thank you. Thanks for the Massimiliano accent thing you made there. Oh, we take a picture. Okay.
And that is a temporary, so we will get you a full.
Yes. Oh, by this.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. We're going to show you a couple of things.
Yes, please.
35 minutes.
Oh, boy.
Every
Do that.
2 minutes is your max.
Yeah.
Max.
So just payback from when I was a chair. No, I just want to, there are no words to describe the honor and the privilege to have been able to serve, but there are so many people that made this board what it is, not just us board member, but in particular, my heart and thank you goes to all the staff, every single one of you, those of you that are present, those they are never present, but they are behind the scene, making sure that our licensee and public are taken care of. So it's been a true honor to serve in this capacity. I believe I was looking at my record that I missed one board meeting in 7 years at one committee. And I say that because I believe in the commitment of serving the public. So especially right now that there is a lot of difficult narratives out there, right? Aiming people that are public servants. I think it's important to remember this is a great opportunity for us to be together, but also keep in mind the mission of the DCA, the mission of serving the public and making sure that we do our best to reduce disparity and marginalizations in the community that we serve. The second thing, I had 2 more years, so I was asked to serve for 2 more years, but I said that's too much. And also because I serve my community in so many different ways. I'm a city commissioner and in advisory capacity in too many commission in my local region in San Diego County. So I don't want to take too much space. And I know there are great people here at the board that will continue the support and the work to make sure that our licensee and our publics are taken care of. So thank you for the opportunity. It's really been an honor. And I'm always able to be reached out. And my staff will be following up the BBS because we have a behavioral health at my LGBT center. So I'll make sure that we stay on top of the things that we're supposed to do as well. So thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Max.
Yeah.
All right, and next on the agenda is the Department of Consumer Affairs update. Melissa Gear from DCA's Legislative Affairs will be presenting an update on the Department of Consumer Affairs. Melissa, the floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me? Is mic on?
Yeah.
Great. Hello and good morning, Chair Jones, Executive Officer Sodegren, and members of the board. I'm Melissa Gear, Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Relations, and I appreciate the opportunity to share the Department of Consumer Affairs update this morning. Before I get started, I would like to take a moment to congratulate and welcome Nick Boyd and Amy Ng to the board, as well as congratulate Wendy Strack on her recent reappointment to the board. In addition, I would like to thank Ross Ehrlich and Max Desposti for their committed service to protect California's consumers through their board service. I have several updates and reminders to share, starting with an update on DCA's DEI efforts. On May 12, 2023, DCA's DEI Steering Committee held its quarterly meeting in person and elected Chairperson Ivana Lamar, who currently serves as the department's tribal liaison and is the Chief of Legislation for the Contractor State License Board, and Vice Chairperson Paul Sanchez, who is the Executive Officer of the Speech, Language, Pathology, and Audiology Board. The committee discussed training, strategic planning, and DEI activities through the end of the calendar year. Providing employees access to DEI training is a priority for the DEI Steering Committee. In June, DCA began offering 3 DEI courses, which are available to all DCA employees. The courses are Understanding the Value of DEI in the Workplace, How to Decode Our Unconscious Bias, and Unleash the Power of Generational Differences. The response from employees to participate in these new DEI learning opportunities has been significant, with high registration and attendance numbers. The DEI Steering Committee is pleased to announce that outside consultant Dr. Bernard Gibson will provide in-person DEI training to DCA managers, supervisors, and leaders in October. In addition, Dr. Gibson will provide virtual training to board members on the morning of October 9th, 2023. Dr. Gibson has 20 years corporate experience managing teams and training employees in business effectiveness. Dr. Gibson also has extensive teaching experience at various colleges, including serving as adjunct faculty since 2006 at University of Massachusetts for the School of Business and Professional Studies. Information on registering for this virtual event will be sent out, and if you have not received it, please let us know. For those that cannot make the training portion will be recorded and be available later. I look forward to updating you in the months ahead on the progress of the DEI Steering Committee. Also, to further the department's efforts to reach the Californians we serve, DCA will request boards and bureaus translate any press releases they issue into Spanish. California's top non-English language spoken is Spanish, and establishing a standard of translating releases into both English and Spanish will enhance the reach of information release. Boards and bureaus are also encouraged to evaluate any additional languages outside of Spanish that may serve their audiences. For additional information, please contact BBR. Next, as many of you may know, the changes to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act that allowed board members to not have to notice their meeting location or meet in an ADA accessible location expired on July 1st. Therefore, public meetings are subject to the traditional pre-COVID requirements for open meetings. DCA boards and bureaus should be prepared to conduct public meetings compliant with the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. This includes whether a meeting is held at a single centralized location or at multiple teleconference locations. Each physical meeting location will need to be identified in the meeting public notices and agendas. Board members must attend meetings in person at the noticed meeting locations. All noticed meeting locations, including locations where a single board member will be, must be ADA accessible, have an agenda posted, and be open to the public. The public will be permitted to attend meetings at any noticed meeting location. Additionally, members of the public need to be able to hear the meeting and participate in public comment from each location. DCA has a Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act guide available and has provided your executive officer with a list of available meeting locations throughout the state. Please reach out to Board and Bureau Relations with any questions or concerns. DCA is committed to helping the boards to make this a smooth transition. SB 544, which may allow for some meetings to be held without noticing the location of the board member, thus allowing remote virtual meetings, is still going through the legislative process, and the department's Division of Legislative Affairs is working with stakeholders and providing updates to the boards and bureaus on the status of this bill. In addition, you may be aware that DCA has been working to implement AB 107 by Assemblymember Salas in 2021 and effective July 1st, 2023. DCA boards and bureaus, unless otherwise exempt, are required to grant temporary licensure to the spouse or domestic partner of an active duty military member stationed in California if the spouse or domestic partner hold a license in another state with the same scope of practice as the profession in California for which they would like to practice. DCA's Office of Information Services and Communications Division have been working to support the implementation. All boards and bureaus were recently provided an outreach toolkit to help share the message of this new benefit to military spouses. DCA has also updated its military resources website to reflect this new benefit as well. Next up is an update on two important projects that we are proud to share with you. The first being the Enlighten Enforcement Project and the second, the Data Governance Project. The department is continuing work on its Enlighten Enforcement Project that is being piloted by the Dental Board of California. The Dental Board has walked through their intake, complaint processing, citation, and investigation processes. One more walkthrough session will cover the discipline and probation processes. The goal is for staff to walk through the processes with subject matter experts so improvements and efficiencies can be found for the dental board that can be carried over to other boards as well. The project also aims to learn best practices between boards and to standardize procedures for all boards and bureaus. The final benefit will also be a template for policies and procedures related to the enforcement process for all boards to utilize. DCA is continuing its efforts to improve its reports regarding licensing and enforcement activities. The director recently led multiple work group meetings beginning in late April through early July with staff from each board and bureau to update the data metrics reported in DCA's annual report. DCA's goal is to ensure consistency between the report data in the annual report, DCA's data portal, and board and bureau sunset reports. Future meetings are expected in August and ongoing to help build new reports or modify existing ones to provide these new metrics for next year's annual report. Additionally, DCA held a meeting on July 17th with all boards and bureaus to review guidance on how boards and bureaus can compile and report data to the department for inclusion in this year's upcoming annual report. Before I close, the following reminders are here to help you as you plan for the fall. First, board members who have been appointed and reappointed cannot begin their service or perform any official functions without first taking the oath of office. Unless otherwise provided, the oath may be taken before any officer authorized to administer oaths. Board members should contact their executive officer to arrange taking the oath of office. Board members will be required to complete the documents listed on the board member appointment checklist or HR 5 and return them to the Office of Human Resources no less than 30 days after their appointment or reappointment. Duties cannot be assumed and appointments cannot be processed until documents are received and are accurately completed. Incomplete packets may delay per diem payments and travel reimbursements due to the member. Second, there are 2 DCA-wide mandatory trainings for 2023. This includes sexual harassment prevention training and information security awareness. All DCA employees and appointees, including board members, will need to complete the sexual harassment prevention training this year. Board members must take the 2-hour supervisory training. This training is required every odd-numbered year and is online, self-paced, and approximately 2 hours. Both the sexual harassment prevention training and information security awareness training are available in the department's learning management system. If board members need assistance in accessing LMS and these trainings, please reach out to Board and Bureau Relations. Third, please keep in mind that all state travel arrangements must be made through DCA's authorized travel agency, Cal Travel Store, or Concur. When traveling by air on official state business, all board members and staff must use the most economical fares available. If the flight is changed, there may be additional charges. Flight changes for personal convenience are not permitted or justified, and the traveler is responsible for any associated charges. Please contact BBR if you have any travel questions. Also, please note the Attorney General issued a press release adding 3 new states to California's restricted travel list with staggered effective dates in 2023-24 as follows. Wyoming, travel restricted effective July 14th. Missouri, travel restricted effective August 28th. And Nebraska, travel was restricted effective October 1st, 2023. If you have any questions, please reach out to your executive officer for additional information. Lastly, board members must complete board member orientation training or BMOT within 1 year of their appointment or reappointment. On October 10th, 2023, BMOT will be offered virtually. This will be the last meeting of the year. Members can register for this training via LMS. And now, thank you again for this opportunity. This concludes my update, and I welcome any questions from the board.
Thank you, Melissa. Are there any questions from board members? Dr. Walker?
Thank you again for your great presentation this morning, Melissa. Just for the info security training, is that required? That's not us. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Are there any questions from the audience? Nope. Are there any questions from our remote participants?
This is the moderator. If anyone has any comments or questions about the DCA report, you can look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Any comments on the DCA report? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
All right. Next on the agenda is the presentation by Lois Hoff-Bergen regarding the Association of Marital and Family Therapy Boards, the AMFTRB National Exam. Steve, would you please provide us with an introduction?
Yes, I don't know if you remember back in November of last year, doesn't seem that long ago, but November 22, we discussed the possibility of accepting the AMFTRB exam, clinical exam for their national exam for licensure in California. At that time, there was some questions raised and some concerns, and the direction for the staff was to actually go get some more information about the exam and report back. So this is kind of the first first informational type of presentation that we're bringing back so that you can get an idea. Because last time we had a review, it was OPES did a fantastic review of the exam and provided information. So now Lois Bergen, who is the executive officer of the AMFTRB, will be presenting to you, just for informational purposes only, a little bit about the exam. And so this will be kind of a start. I expect that in subsequent meetings, maybe in November, maybe next year, we'll bring back some more information. So really at this point, we're not making a decision on whether we want to accept the exam or not, but it's just to learn more about the exam. And so Lois has been nice enough to come to present some material, and she will be doing that virtually. Lois, good morning.
Good morning.
There you are. Hi.
Hi.
And we have some slides, and I think it was in the material, and we have the slides up. So I think we are. I will let you take the mic, Lois.
All right, thank you. And you will also let me know when I need to stop talking, right?
Okay.
Thanks.
And additionally, after the presentation, Lois will ask, there will be a point for if you have some questions or clarifying questions for her. So.
That's great. And good morning to everyone. And thank you also for this invitation to talk about the MFT National Exam. There are 4 topics that Steve and I had been talking about that we thought would be helpful to show you some information about. I'll go through, assuming you've read the slides already, and add a few comments. And then, as Steve indicated at the end, be happy to attempt to answer any questions you might have. And I think I'm supposed to say next slide. So the exam development process, the top slide, is essentially the standard that all licensing exams are based on. California one you may know well. We use the same process, starting with a job task analysis study, sometimes called a role delineation study. Our last one was conducted in 2021/2022. We felt at that point it was an important time to redo this, given the major change due to COVID into teletherapy and telesupervision, and finding out what needed to become part of the content on the exam, what the training had been, what people were thinking they needed to know about this. The job analysis, we've done many since 1987 when the exam started. California has always been a member of the association. The BBCS board has always been a member of the association and has always been participating in all of these squares across this sheet of paper. To every role delineation study, we've usually combined the entire group of respondents and then pulled out California respondents, and that information I think I made it available to Steve, who may or may not have already shared that with the board. The second part of the chart here has to do with the content outline, which is developed based on the job analysis information we get. We ask questions, as you probably have participated in these before, to get verification that the domains we're still using are indeed legitimate and have basis in the clinical practice of MFT clinicians. Then once that piece of information is gathered and put together, the exam construction committee, which is a diverse member, we presently have 6 people working on that, begin to discuss the weightings, which are also suggested in the job delineation study, to what the test blueprint should it cover. Our handbook outlines the 6 domains that we cover and shows also the weights to each domain. Then the item writing and review process begins, or actually is an ongoing event in our world. The last item writing workshops were in February of 2023 and in March of 2023. We held 2 in-person ones this year, which was a nice change from the other years. However, all during the year, we accept items that subject matter experts do submit to us and incorporate them into the exam blueprint. Exam development processes then go on through the editorial staff. We work with Professional Testing Corporation in New York City, and their diverse staff goes through the editing process, reviewing the DEIA approaches. We have some visual pieces in genograms for those of you who are aware of what those are, that we have worked to review with the editors and the DEIA folks there about how is this best presented for a visually impaired person. So that process goes on all year long, but especially after we submit new items, we try to update the exam by at least 100 to 200 items per year. Currently, our exam bank of items is approaching a little over 3,000 items that we can use. Then the exam administration process is conducted through PTC with Prometric as our exam site locator. And that sort of is an ongoing process. You can register each month for the next month to take an exam. We use exam windows. Exam windows are a full week. We have as many centers as Prometric uses with military families, and internationally, we also have access to using those settings. With the addition of 3 new members to AMFTRB, which are all small island countries, the Northern Mariana Islands being the smallest, we used the office of the board to administer the exam that they offered last year. So we try to be very flexible in international requests coming from military families, coming from these small island nations that are parts of us now, and work to make it as easy as possible for different access than the typical computer-based access. After an exam window is completed, we begin the statistical analysis and review. This is why we delay our scoring of the exam for clients or candidates. We take, the handbook says 20 days. Usually it happens within the first 5 to 6 days, business days, where we look at any items that have come up on the exam as having a statistical anomaly, that we want to review the item and make sure there wasn't a typographical error, there hadn't been a glitch of some sort computer-wise, or if there's content that is not clear enough, that kind of thing. The editorial staff or the statistical group in New York first highlights those. They review the items, then they come back to us and the exam construction committee to work on what happened with this item. Should it be double keyed? Is it something that is accurate or inaccurate? Was there a mistake in how it was coded? That kind of thing. Once that review is done by our subject matter experts on the exam construction committee, then the exam's scoring is sent to the state portals and to the next day to candidates through an email where they go into the portal as well and retrieve their exam scores. The standard setting meeting this year, we usually hold it the very first week of February. That follows the first administration of the new form. We run 4 forms a year from January through December, 1 a quarter. After the first form is completed in January, we hold the standard setting meeting using, again, typical methods for establishing the score point, pass point. The Angoff method and the Roche method are the 2 most common that we use. Then after the standard is set, we score the forms based on that form from January. And then finally, we go to the score reporting. That goes out, we get that feedback, and come back to the item writing. That's a very quick process, and you can ask me questions about that if any of it doesn't make sense to you. However, I will move on to the demographic data piece in those 4 areas. This is, I would first say, always an ongoing thing we're working on. Part of the demographic questions that we ask have to do with what we're seeing as results from the exam, questions candidates can ask at the end of the exam. But one of the major pieces we've been looking at, and these are the first 9 questions basically on this demographic data we gather. And the caveat is always that this is voluntary data. No one has to complete this for us. It's not a requirement. But our interest has been in trying to establish the different characteristics between people who pass the test initially and repeat test takers, because that is a major impact we've seen on passing rate. And repeat test takers, we want to be able to provide states with as much as we can learn about. Here's what happens with repeat test takers. A few years ago, we put out a policy suggestion guidelines for states to consider about what you want to do in case of repeating failures. One state took the action of saying, once you've taken the exam 3 times and failed it, then you can never take it again. Another state has no limits on how many times you can take it. The only limit we have is that you can't take one form more than once. So you could test 4 times a year if that's what you wanted to do. We are just gathering this data about the characteristics of repeat test takers and initial test takers based on these kinds of questions to see if there's some more suggestions we can give to boards about what you might want to do. The majority of states who are in the association have some sort of a policy of reviewing or contacting or checking in with and I should say California is different because there's so many LMFTs. So in a small state, this makes more or fewer numbers in another state. This makes more sense that they can look at what have you been studying? Do you need to do something more in supervision? Do you need to do something more in a class that you might want to take? Some states are very personal in talking to candidates who have failed it 2 or 3 times. Other states take a totally hands-off stance and you just keep taking it and taking it and taking it. The next questions having to do with membership in an association has been the standard one we've had forever, partly in our interest in, is there anything that professional membership helps or doesn't help in passing the exam? It's never really produced much information, but we have been asking it. Then questions 11 through 15 developed as part of the demographic interest because of the teletherapy coming on, states going into temporary orders around COVID, and then some states have continued the changes that they made, allowing teletherapy and telesupervision. So we've been trying to gather some data on that. The next group of questions are the general ones. We continually try to ask and develop what are the best kinds of things to ask around ethnicity, race, gender, age range, those kinds of things. And then the next set have to do with English language learners. One of the things that the AMFTRB delegates wanted to offer in some states was that English second language learners are able to have some accommodations. We call it a special arrangement around accommodations. Some states, again, in the candidate handbook, they outline which states accept this. There are some states who definitely don't accept this, but the main piece, if your state allows, if a state allows someone to take an English language exception, they can have up to 3 hours extra on the exam if they want to take that. I think there are 14 states now that do allow that. There are about 8 states that don't allow it, and the rest of the states, it's sort of depending. They may not have many people ever applying for it. And then finally, the 23rd question has to do with, have you taken it in a paper pencil format? Is there any difference showing up between that and taking it online? Most often, a paper and pencil administration is available for a specific ADA accommodation and or because of a military base being more easily accessible to have an office where you have a paper and pencil administration. So that's the diversity we have in our media for the examination. The diversity issues, and it was interesting to hear your update on that, has been, I think, an important improvement in the last 8-9 years. I would say it has always been a part of our approach from 1989 when the exam was first given. This is a list you can read of the kinds of pieces we try to address. We're always adding to this list. The newest thing we've begun to talk about with some states who are interested is how can you use the data in your setting to help with the board members' idea about protection of the public, what things help with protection of the public. There's definitely more and more training that our subject matter experts are required by their states for their license, as well as by their agencies. So I think there's been a great deal of improvement in how this is getting more broadly applied to use in the exam. The major addition that we've been addressing in the last few years continues to be, as technology developments, the accessibility question, especially for visually impaired candidates. We're trying to keep up with as much as we can what works. We've also, as I mentioned earlier, gone to the graphics that are in the exam, having a written description. We've also begun to have that written description available for readers who read for visually impaired persons, trying to get much more consistency around what is covered with those questions. Interestingly, this week, I think it's the second time we've had a concern around DEIA, which has been attitudes of staff at the site, which we do at sites have monitors that show, or cameras that record interactions between all the people coming into a site to test. And this latest one was the candidate taking the exam felt like she was not treated equally to the other subject candidates, other people taking the exam. Our process is that in that case, we go back, look at the film, we talk to the managers who manage the proctors at the sites, and then come to a resolution with, here's what we found, thank you for your complaint, here's what we can do with it, that case-by-case piece. Attitudes that people get treated with are very important, and we want that to be something that PTC through Prometric for us is sure that is a part of the training manual for their proctors, that those subtleties of how a person interacts with the candidate presenting for the exam is as important as language that's used, or lighting, or whether the computer's working that day. So that was a fascinating piece that showed up when we looked at the film. It was very helpful, actually. The common ADA requests that we see are those listed. I'm sure those meet with what you guys have also done. One of the major changes we had, as each year in the last 5 years, there have been more and more requests for ADA accommodations. Those are determined by the candidate who fills out an ADA request form, submits it on their application, and provides the documentation they have for their ADA request. The biggest uptick, interestingly, in the last 3 years has been generalized anxiety disorder. One of the problems we encountered in our staff making those decisions had to do with what's being signed off for here. So we added on our form the description from the DSM-5 of what general anxiety disorder means, so that a person who's saying they have this, and this is the person who's documenting it for me, has to sign that they've read and understood that. The final piece, and I think one of the most interesting and exciting ones that we've worked on to address the issues of bias, is the differential item functioning. I can give you my understanding of the diff analysis. A psychometrician, which you guys have as well as we, can probably explain it much better. You've seen the slide. Essentially, the two examples I have that might be helpful is that each item on a form, the form comes back, we do the usual statistical analysis. Are there any anomalies? Then we also run a further analysis of have it on each item. Has this item showed any bias by group, by gender? Those are the two we use. We haven't used age. But for example, one of the first things we found on a form 3 years ago was that white women had a disadvantage on, there are 3 items on that form. They were all tied to one scenario that asked about EAP. And some of the discussion then, as we looked at the statistical anomaly, was, do in the general population, white women understand what EAPs are? Do they see EAPs? What we did in the next step was to refine that that scenario with the 3 items, to make it more clear what an EAP was, in case someone really had no experience with working with an EAP. A lot of MFTs practice in private practice, not so much have training in agencies where an EAP may or may not play in more. So those questions then on the next form, when we checked back, that did not show up as statistically strange and referring to a differential item functioning. Likewise, in the last one from last quarter of last year, one of the questions that took an interesting uptick in a positive way was that because we could now ask by group, a gender group, we used those who self-identified as transgender men did outstandingly on the first domain around systemic thinking. And it was good to hear something positive on that side. There weren't other groups who were discriminated against because of it, but that group, especially the item popped up in our diff analysis because that group of persons did spectacularly well, especially on our first domain, which had to do with systemic thinking. So that's part of how that whole differentiation of items is looked at. We look and run that analysis on every form, on every item, on every form. There are 180 items on a form. So that always gives us good information when we come back to the group who puts together the 4 forms for the year. The last part that I also included, because I know it's an emerging area, has been for about 3 or 4 years now, of alternative pathways to licensure. And are there ways that we can say multiple choice exams are what we've used to show competence, protecting the public, but are there other ways to do that? And I listed some of those as far as how we look toward what could we do to say a candidate is capable and competent and protecting the public. The major ones that have emerged as alternative pathways are using, and on the next slide, I think I list those, the degree diploma approach. In the past, this has changed, but early on in the 1980s, 90s, Michigan used the degree essentially with some experience as the measure of proving you were competent. They did not use a national exam. They did have some state exam pieces, which were more a jurisprudence kind of thing of here are the laws in Michigan. Another potential pathway that some states have been looking at and talking about, mostly in law, has been under an experiential kind of combination. where the curriculum that someone takes is developed between the licensing board and the state program, in our case, an MFT program, if you have a training program in your state, and you have second year students focus on certain simulated activities for clinical practice, like especially in the areas of ethics, professionalism, behavioral health guidelines. Then a portfolio is developed that both the training program and the state board believe meet what you've identified as the important components that the person needs to obtain. And then the board keeps control of what they're looking for to have a newly graduated person accomplish in order to be public protective and have a fully independent practice. They tend to involve simulated work examples, videotape, audio tape, those kinds of things. It keeps the control with the licensing board and then allows for development of courses within training programs. Simple way to talk about it is, in the end, what's produced is a portfolio of experiences that meet the requirements established by the board, and that can substitute for a multiple choice exam. There are obviously pros and cons to all of these methods, and that's one of the fascinating ones about portfolios. Teachers have done this in the past. They're talking about how to do it with law in Oregon and Washington with law student graduates. Another pathway is a supervised practice pathway where after you graduated and you're in an internship of getting 1,000 to 1,500 hours, you work under a state qualifying supervisor, meeting the certain regulations that the board has developed for the supervisor to talk about what clinical experience you need to gain. Those of you who are LMFTs on the board may remember a time when it was very prescribed what kinds of experiences an LMFT needed, like you needed a certain number of couple hours, a certain number of hours where you saw parents and children, a certain number of hours where you saw individuals, and could have also had a certain number of hours where you did group therapy. Part of the supervised practice pathway would be a good definition by a board of what constitutes clinical work that is important in protecting the public. And the board keeps that review and works again in a portfolio model with hearing how that person in their post graduation submits the information that they need to meet those requirements that they've established. Performance task assessment pathways is another interesting development in the world. It's another type of exam where you're measuring critical thinking. We looked into this pretty extensively 2 years ago. It's based on a scenario that a candidate gets with certain reading materials associated with it, and then the board has to score a certain number of written samples. It's essentially an essay response to a scenario, and it's limited to what the person brings, obviously, and knows, but then certain articles that are also there for them to read. The scoring is first completed by 2 board members licensing board members who say, yes, they got all these critical pieces. There's work where AI has been trained then to be able to read that so that down the road it gets to be easier. We experimented with looking at our domain 1, which has to do with systemic thinking, and what would it be a scenario that showed that? What would the person have to read? 3 to 5 articles or short pieces. How several board members would score it, and then how AI could take over. It's an extremely extensive process. I'm not sure it totally replaces the whole breadth of what gets covered in an exam. For example, we only looked at domain 1, and that was a 3-hour writing kind of thing. There are issues around writing skills, reading skills, and all of that come into play as well. In the group that we spoke with about this process, and there's some people who are using this for SAT and ACT substitutes at the high school going into college level, they still needed to have a 30 to 100 item multiple choice piece to measure information literacy, essentially, is what they deemed it. All of these methods also still run into a major problem around portability of what happens with the license if you decide to work in other states, or if you're moving to another state. If your state has a portfolio model but the other state doesn't, that adds some issues. And depending on what state you're in, what a licensing board would look at for what they believe are the critical skills to have, there at this point isn't consistency among that across all of the jurisdictions. That quickly, I hope, was some of what information you might be interested in. We all, as this has been talked about in our association among states, kept as one of the alternative pathways, I think I shared, is the national exam as it is, or the California exam as you have it already. I shared with Steve the other day that one of the informal groups here, when we talked with some graduate students about this, at first all thought a portfolio was a much better plan, and any of these alternatives sounded better to the exam. But to a person, they came back to us within the next 8 hours and said, no, actually, the exam sounds pretty good to us because it's one and done. All of this would take a great deal of time. I think there's some fascinating things that could be developed around portfolios, around licensing boards, working with training programs. But as you have celebrated today, the hard work that all board members put in, that's a huge ask for a licensing board to develop specific pieces that they want to see in this training. Is it a good endeavor to engage in? Yes. One of the things I also shared with Steve just this week was, and some of you may have already had this invitation, one of the research projects we're involved in and looking at now is, what is the supervised experience? How do the people who are getting it post-degree see what they're getting, and what do they want out of that 1,500, 2,000 hours? What do supervisors of those people see, and what is their training? What are they after? As well as, what is the regulatory board looking for? As a board member in Colorado at one time, it was very clear that a lot of candidates applying for full licensure in our state at that time, and this is olden days, had not much training in working with custody. And so one of the things I think we would have identified at that point is that, and we measured it some by the kinds of complaints that the board was getting, that candidates were doing custody evaluation work who didn't have any training in it. And since family law is an important part, what were we asking or thinking about from our board about what Colorado people needed to know about that? So questions, I feel like I've just run off at the mouth here.
Thank you for the presentation, Lois. We appreciate
Certainly.
it. Are there any questions from our board? Max?
More the questions, I was wondering if that presentation can be made available, or maybe not, to the board, I mean.
What presentation?
The slides.
They're in the packet.
They are in the packet?
yeah,
I
they're in
couldn't find it.
Yeah, they're in the.
They're there? Perfect. Then even better. Thank you.
Any other comments, or Abigail?
Hello, hi.
Hi.
Wow, that's so informative. I love the alternative pathways and that we're thinking outside of the box. And by the way, this is Abigail Ortega, LCSW member.
Thank you.
I saw that 2 of the questions were about like English your primary language and English your first language. So just wondering about, is there a difference? Why are those 2 separate questions? And then I've been following this other legislation here in California. It's AB 370 for Biliteracy Inclusion Act. And it focuses on biliteracy and like how students in California are testing proficiency And they're doing a lot of changes now inside of the California school system to look at alternative pathways, right, for students to demonstrate proficiency in Spanish. And one of the things that they're looking to change is scoring the oral language portion of the test as like increasing the value of the oral portion. And here in California, 40% of kids in public school are English language learners, which is like 1 in 5. So I don't know like how that breaks down inside of the world of mental health practitioners that are taking the test, but they're probably not eligible for ADA accommodations, but I wonder if they're still being impacted, you know, when they're taking these tests, if we're not really capturing that they do have proficiency, right, in the concepts, but because it's like written, if we're missing, you know, their ability to understand how to practice. So, you know, is there something else we can create, different accommodations for people that identify that they are biliteral?
What we've talked about is the same thing, because there are obviously different ways to try to compensate for language, and we haven't adopted any. So this is just in the conversation stage of, yes, would a reader be appropriate, or would having vocal computer generated voices reading and making that an accommodation as part of extra time? Because you're correct, it's not an ADA accommodation. The dilemma comes into who pays for it. And the third, before I get into that tangent, the third piece that we've looked at is dictionaries as well. Again, cost plays into that, and what our the group we consult with outside of PTC in New York City around language learners in the school system is that often dictionaries create more pressure and anxiety because the concepts don't translate. Probably the standard one is the word depression. By the time you go through 4 or 5 different languages, depression is an ailment of the heart. And so the translations aren't always very good. And in that timed time that you take an exam, looking up words hasn't proved to be a great help in moving scores forward. So that one we have not looked into as much, but we are talking about what would it be like to add a reader into that situation. And as I've said, some states are very excited about different possibilities and could agree on at least extra time. We haven't had that same kind of discussion with agreement in discussions about would it be good to say, here's a reader, or here's a computer reading it, the text to this person. But it is something we're talking about. I don't know where it'll go, because equally we have some states who are just, this is not an appropriate thing. It's not an ADA accommodation, et cetera, et cetera. So again, at the point at which California, who is a member of our association and does get to talk about all this stuff, I think that's a great point to raise, and it would be helpful.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Susan?
I'm curious about family law because every state has different family law, and it's a very important subject for your profession. So how do you deal with that?
I appreciate that, and I chuckle because it is very difficult. I think one of the things of an alternative pathway that could be very interesting, especially if a state licensing board can get to defining what they would like, that could give us the specificity needed. It sort of throws teletherapy out the window, but what we did when we started talking about family law was try to go to a more general kinds of principles in not what is more, what do you need to know? This would be the better way to say it. What do you need to know about the practice of custody evaluations across the United States? Well, number one, that you probably need special training in it. Number two, that if your state has advocates and guardian ad litem and a whole other series, how do you work with those people? If you've been providing family therapy, what is your role legally and ethically in then providing custody evaluations? So those are where we go on the exam with it. But I think moving out of a multiple choice exam model to a portfolio model, it could get much more specific and helpful. And what I think we'll learn in this work we're doing on what's the experience, the clinical experience we want people to have. I could envision a board saying, if you're coming to us saying you want to be an independent practitioner in our state, what we would like, if you're going to tell us what kind of cases you're going to do, are you going to do high conflict divorce? And if you are, then show us what you're going to learn about all this custody stuff. And in a portfolio, you would be able to do that better than in a national exam, I think.
Kelly.
Kelly Renisinger, public member. Dr. Bergen, thank you very much for all of this information. Frankly, this is kind of what I was hoping was going to come from the ASWB presentation, but this is outstanding information. My question is, one of the concerns of the board with implementing a national exam is not reinforcing or strengthening existing racial or ethnic stereotypes from an exam-based pathway to licensure. It appears from your presentation that the differential item functioning analysis controls for ethnicity, race, and gender. I guess to cut to the chase, my big question is, does it do that better or worse than the existing California exam, in your opinion?
I can't comment on the California. I don't know how that's done in California, so I can't compare them. What I can say about what I've learned in the last 5 years of this statistical approach is I think it's very helpful. It also helps address, in my experience, some of the regional differences that can occur, and it gives us a better basis. Like there was a complaint, it's probably 5 years, 6 years ago now, from a person in the Northwest of the country about an item referencing a client or a scenario referencing a client from the Southeast of the United States. And the Northwest person who took the exam objected to a term that was used in describing this family. And so what we did is I think what we ran into was this difference in regions, that in the Southeast part of our country, this was a very prideful thing. It was okay to describe, to use that descriptor in the scenario. In the Northwest, it was not okay. So being able to go back to, but how did people perform on the item in the diff analysis was very helpful, because no group showed up as being negatively affected by it. So we had one voice of one person that made us candidate feedback that made us go, okay, wait, we better look at this. We better talk to our subject matter experts again. We pulled in a couple of other academic faculty people that we knew in both regions of the country. But the statistical analysis could let us look specifically at all the different groups that were identified. Again, this was 5 years ago, so we didn't quite have as good a differentiation between how people identified for their ethnicity. So it was very helpful to get it out of that regionalism and find a way to say, did we really screw up on this item? Did we not? And taking it down to that level as the administrator, I found was a really helpful thing to do. Does that help answer your question? I think it gives us
It does.
not only the emotional reaction, but it gives us this mathematical piece that comes up that we can watch over time as well.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Dr. Walker?
Thank you, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Bergman, for your presentation. It was very informative. And if I may, I just wanted to ask a couple of follow-up questions and just a couple of basic questions with that. So I wanted to reference your slides 4 and 5. Just a quick question, your demographic data requested? As
Yes.
titled, is that a complete list?
This is the complete list from the last year. It's always undergoing, and I took it out of our annual report from 22. So there in 23, there are a couple of different kinds of questions. As I said, I tried to categorize it by some of what we need information about because of what we see happening with test scores, the initial takers and the repeat test takers. We tried to gather some more data on that. And we have over the years gone from, the old category of, are you over 40? Are you under 40? Are you male? Are you female? To a much broader definition. And so these reflect that kind of thing. And I didn't put in the specificity of, but it's in the annual report, which Steve has from last year, where that is an appendix that he could share with you easily. For example, we opened up the number of categories around how a candidate identified as by gender. And that really was helpful to see that it isn't just men, women. And that gave us a little more detailed information, I think, going forward. The second one that we opened up, and it's in that report that Steve has, much more ethnic background, because we now have 3 essentially island commonwealths that are apart. The category around, are you a white American? Are you, do you identify as a Black American? Do you identify as what? We were able to ask more questions, and I think that's a good step forward. So we're, I think, continuing always to look at those questions and welcome new ones. This is just from the 2022 report that I took this group.
And I appreciate that response, and I will follow up with Steve. So forgive me if I ask a question that's related to this information that may be in the index. I'm just not looking at it, so I only see what's in front of me right now.
That's fine.
Okay, and not to make an assumption here, this is a voluntary demographic data.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right, so with that said, if I look at slide 5, let's see. I'm sorry, your ADA slide? Is that?
The accommodations, yes.
ADA accommodations, frequent requests. And I'm sure that's just a short list.
Actually, for 2022, those were the most frequently asked.
Most frequently asked, okay.
Yeah. But it is not an exhaustive list.
Okay.
By any means.
Duly noted. I think that's important. Frequently asked. With that, I'm wondering, have you considered capturing data? I don't know where you would put it or how you're gathering this demographic information on surveys or whatever. I don't know if you're capturing some of this information on the test itself when people are actually, before they take the exam. I'm not quite sure where you might capture this information, but are you considering looking at invisible disabilities? And I'm happy to define what that is for you if you're not familiar, or to the audience.
Go ahead. I am familiar, but go ahead.
And again, this is taken just really quickly online. I just pulled it up, but information as defined on invisible disabilities include medical conditions that are not immediately apparent. Includes an example list such as chronic illness such as renal failure, diabetes, sleep disorders, diseases significantly that impair normal activities on daily living. People with invisible disabilities can have chronic pain associated with those sleep disorders or just sleep disorders. And unfortunately, many of these invisible disabilities are not captured. And so when people share that some of their reasons for having difficulties taking the exam, they're not taken seriously. And as we know, mental health is real. And so we want to make sure that we have that captured as well. And it comes in many facets. So I'm wondering if some kind of way you've thought about it or are considering capturing invisible disabilities.
Yes, actually, we do. The form, and I didn't include it in this, the form that a candidate who would have any disability would complete, who was asking for extra time. Any candidate can fill out that form and provide information, and then that comes to us, and the invisible disabilities do meet ADA accommodations. For example, the closed head injury is the first one that popped into my head as you were talking. Another is the pain management piece.
Yeah.
And so what that candidate does, it's just, we don't have a lot of people do that. That's why it didn't make this frequent requests. But yes, one of the most extensive ability or adaptations, we do have separate rooms. A person needed a mat to rest, to physically lay down because of the pain in their back for 10 minutes of every hour. So that was approved. They brought a mat. They had certain foam cushions, is the best way I can describe it, for elbows and shoulders as they sat. We had special chairs. There's a special table in some sites. Sometimes getting the site to have all the equipment is a little bit of another struggle, but the standing desk, lowering desk, those kinds of things. So yes, those kinds of invisible disabilities are taken into account, and we come up with, as creative as we can, how best to respond to those. This is just the frequency thing. Usually what the person with a mild closed head injury that comes to mind to me right now had extra time, had large print, had a reader, had a scribe, had frequent breaks, had a separate room, this was the person who had the mat to lay down for 10 minutes out of each hour. So those things, that's how it went out of the state's hands to sort of our hands in a way. It used to be that states approved ADA accommodations or not. What we now have is the direct information from the candidate, fills out the form, has their prescribing physician or psychologist or whomever say, these are the serious issues that this person has, and this is why we would request medication that they need to take if they're a diabetic, the time break, the lighting, that kind of thing. And then that person who is documenting for the candidate that these are the real things that have happened and what they need, then that list comes to us and we do our best. Some sites can't always do anything. One state, there were 5 states, there were 5 sites in the state, but only 3 of them had the accommodation space and availability that the person was requesting. So there was a limit. In the closest one to this person was not one of the equipped places, but getting that person to the 3rd place was something that we could work out. To one of the 3 places. So yes, it's just not that we get that many of those.
Do you think that there's a great awareness of this form and folks understanding, test takers, examinees understanding that this extra time includes such accommodations and that it
Yes.
falls under ADA accommodations?
Yes and no, I should say that more generally, because it is the form, we get the requests on the forms, we ask them what they need, what their provider who's worked with them says they need. what maybe their graduate program has asked for. I say, and we continue to keep writing our forms as simply as we can, but that form is in the handbook. It is an addendum to the annual report. We do our best to help people read or hear or understand that the more information they give us. One of the best staff people we have in New York calls every candidate who asks for an accommodation. That is they've sent in the forms and documented it, calls and discusses with them what's available, what they need specifically. One of the biggest ones around that was well, pregnancy is one that's visible, but it was a diabetic pregnancy, and so there were certain other medication breaks, foods that had to be a part of that. So our individual in New York called and worked with that candidate to get the needs met that she needed. I the not so much side of me says, if the person reads and understands and is brave enough to ask, and I know that's always a question too, filling out the form, at least in our mind, checks getting that person on our end to contact that and to contact that candidate and say, okay, what do you need? Here's what we can do. Here's what we can't do. Sometimes we don't have access to an absolute soundproof room, but we try to work on it as best we can.
Yeah, I appreciate your transparency in responding to that question, because I'm hearing 50-50 here. So my takeaway is that that's room for improvement there in creating this awareness for folks that are interested in taking this exam, or required to, repeating it or whatever. We can do more work on our end, and I'm including myself with you here, to help address that issue. So I'm sorry, it beckons the question then, is the procedure for completing that form, the process and procedures around that, is that, I hope that it's not, I don't want to say easy, but not difficult.
Yeah, yes, and it's interesting because we're going again through our handbook. We do this every year, but one of the things we're looking at for the new handbook for next year is the at what reading level is the language? You probably know that you can put things through. So we're lowering the level of expectation in the language that we use. The form, I can say I think it's simple because I'm familiar with it. Is it perfectly simple? We've had people, and again, that's why once that's triggered in our system, her name is Sherry. Sherry calls and says, okay, what are the accommodations you need? Here's what we need to know about those. Here's what will happen at the test site when you go. It was a woman who had to take the mat as well as all these different foam things for pillowing her arm. Explained how those would be looked at when they got there, that kind of thing. So there was a person who followed her along. The more accommodation needs that are laid out and asked about and discussed, the more we can meet that. It does.
So this is in your demographic data as well? Is this captured? Or has been?
It's captured. Most often what we report here are the most frequent ones, but that we obviously keep track of all that data. That's how I know because I'm not in New York, how I know about the accommodation requests that come in. We can provide more of that in the annual report if people are interested in that. The form is available in print in I don't know, the one case where a person was not obviously able to read the form, they had someone fill it out. We've had it done by computer, voice, text, translating. We've also had it done by readers to say, here's the form, or the person's supervisor, that kind of thing. So access for site issues are pretty not routine, but if someone says, I can't read that form, we have ways to make sure that they can still know and have that form.
Thank you, Lois.
Mhm.
We need to move this along a little bit. Do you have any other further questions, Dr. Walker?
Are you rushing me?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
Thank you. Excuse me, this is a very important issue, but I respect the chair's decision to move on. Thank you for responding to my questions, Dr. Bergman.
And thank you for highlighting that. And again, one of the nice things about having California always be a member is asking these questions is really helpful because it keeps us knowing, okay, this needs more work or this we've got as well as we can for this point. But thank you all for
Thank
listening.
you. I wish we had
for
more
your
time, but we obviously don't. Thank you very much.
What I would actually recommend, and that is if you can put together a list of other questions that you might have that Steve can send along, because I think that would,
Thank you.
yeah, I think
I'm
that would
good.
be important.
I'll
Thank you.
follow up with Steve.
And I can explain kind of what we do currently with our, and kind of give you more ideas of that.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Good morning.
Morning.
Samaya Nahar with Political Solutions, representing the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. We don't have any questions, but I just wanted to quickly provide some comments if that's appropriate. So we just wanted to highlight CAM's support and the importance for California to transition to the national exam. Transitioning to the national exam will help eliminate some of the limitations that California licensed MFTs currently face, such as license portability. So the national exam allows MFTs to have standardized qualifications. So California moving towards a national exam will help to ensure that California MFTs are at the table as these policy conversations shape up around license portability. Adopting the national exam will also allow California LMFTs to take advantage of the increased opportunities that are now present due to telehealth expansion, as more people are now more comfortable using telehealth as well. And not moving to the national exam will actually negatively impact California LMFTs. So we just want to thank you for putting this item on your agenda and having this robust discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ben Caldwell, LMFT. Thank you, Dr. Bergen, for this presentation. To Board Member Ranasinghe's point, my understanding is that OPES doesn't do DIF analysis on California exams at all because they don't gather the data necessary to do that analysis. So I do think that AMFTRB, by the mere fact of doing that analysis, is a step ahead of what we do here. I do have 3 questions for Dr. Bergen, Chair Jones. I don't know if you want to give her the opportunity to answer here or just wrap these into questions that Steve might forward. But I just to get the questions out.
Yeah, I think that would be great if we can do that.
Okay. First question is about data. Since it sounds like AMFTRB has pass rate data based on race and ethnicity and other demographic factors, would you commit to publicly releasing a report similar to the one ASWB released in August of last year, providing meaningful data to boards and the public on equity or disparities in examination outcomes? The second question is about differential test functioning. You noted that AMFTRB assesses items for differential item functioning. How do you assess for differential test functioning on the exam level rather than the item level, given the possibility that small amounts of differential item functioning may lean generally in the same direction, advantaging some groups of examinees at the expense of others? And then the third question is about repair. One question or one concern that's been raised about the ASWB clinical exam is that when an item that has been released as a scored item then goes on to later demonstrate differential item functioning, it's removed from future exams as a scored item, but there doesn't appear to be any repair for folks who had that item appear on their test as a scored item. How does AMFTRB address items that have been included as scored items, but then later go on to demonstrate differential item functioning and get removed for that reason? Would love answers to all of those in whatever process you prefer. Thank you very much.
And I would prefer an email, please, because I tried writing those down, but I know you can actually present those a lot nicer in an email for me. I'd appreciate that.
Got it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Caldwell.
Hello, how are you doing? I have several relevant and extensive comments and.
Can you introduce yourself
Oh,
first?
sorry, yes.
Yeah.
I'm Mark Danziger, AMFT, number 109863.
Awesome. And just a reminder, we have 2 minutes for public comments. Thank you.
But I'm just going to give you the highlights. Hello, I'm Mark Danziger, AMFT, number 109863. Thank you for allowing me these few minutes to speak on severe inefficiencies and significant damage caused to our our profession by the clinical MFT exam. I've come here from LA just to speak to you all now. I have taken off work to be here because that's how important I believe this issue is to me. But not only me, but for the hundreds of experienced and highly qualified licensed eligible therapists who are able to maintain their careers as therapists, helping thousands of clients collectively, but somehow unable to pass the California clinical exam, no matter how much we study, how many prep programs costing hundreds of dollars each we do, and how many times we pay the $250 exam fee to retake the exam. I have more than 6 years of experience working as a therapist, well past the required 3,000 hours of internship required to take the clinical exam. I have 1 year experience working with clients with dementia and the remaining 5 years working in drug rehabilitation. What more can I do to prove to you and the public at large that I can be an effective and ethical therapist? In my case, what can exam prove that I have not yet proven interacting with dozens of dementia patients and thousands of clients in recovery from substance abuse and addiction? Most of what the clinical exam covers is inappropriate for what I do on a daily basis in my clinical work. This exam should be, if anything, a natural extension of our graduate studies, then following through with the actual and practical questions on what we do every day in our clinical work. On this exam, the majority of questions offer no clear answers from the 4 terrible choices given, so you're forced to guess the least bad of the 4 horrible choices offered. In addition, the exam questions are way too long, confusing, and very poorly worded. There is no purpose for you to force us to decipher
15
excessively
seconds.
long. Sorry?
15 seconds.
Okay. Why is it that all 499 of the other states do fine with the national test, and there aren't any reports of therapists in mass going rogue or doing unethical things or injuring clients?
2
There's
minutes.
okay. All right. Thank you. I'll try to get the rest of this inserted for the next meeting's material.
Thank you. You can always email us your comments. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is John DeLine, and I'm an MFT student. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was really informative, and I really wanted to just quickly come up here. I really liked the idea of supervision pathway to licensure as just because the infrastructure already exists. And I do support, if we're going to continue licensing, that MFT, the California exam, gets changed to the national exam because of the potability and all of the other benefits that come from it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, hello, hello. Kimberly Wormstein, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter. I liked where Dr. Annette Walker was going. I am also requesting the release of a comprehensive study giving us data surrounding the disadvantages and advantages of test takers based on race, ethnicity, language, and age. I think that where we are as it relates to testing and biases, before we adopt any tests, in regardless to whatever your profession is, we need to take a look at whether or not these tests have some disadvantages towards people of color. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the audience? All right, thank you. Moderator, would you open the lines for comments from our remote audience?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the presentation, you may click on the hand icon to raise your hand. You may click on the question mark icon and type the word comment into the text box to request a comment spot, and our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Our first request for comment comes from someone logged into WebEx as Kathy Atkins. Kathy, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 2 minutes with a 15-second warning. You're unmuted.
Morning, everyone. This is Kathy Atkins, Deputy Executive Director of CAFT. We did submit a letter on this topic, but I wanted to hit the high points. I think I'm a tad above or a tad ahead of the conversation as I recognize this is ongoing, but I did want to take the opportunity. CAFT is asking the board to review, assess, and consider moving to the national exam. We've been discussing this change over the last few years with numerous boards weighing in, specifically prioritizing the best interests of both MFTs as well as patients, and we've come to the decision to advocate on this. As noted in the letter, the exam has been a barrier when advocating for federal positions. However, it's really license portability where we're seeing what could be an insurmountable barrier for our California MFTs. Our goal is to place our MFTs in the best possible scenario to achieve parity with the therapists in the other 49 states and not handcuff their options. Certainly, we recognize that all standardized exams are imperfect, and there's certainly room for improvement, as Lois has mentioned. However, if California moved to the national exam, the benefit is that stakeholders like the BBS or CAMT will be at the table to help in the discussion as exams are improved and problems are resolved. This, we don't really know what the future holds, but as it's unfolding, as license portability is moving forward, as exams in its entirety being assessed, we really want to put California
15
MFTs
seconds.
in the best position possible and not punish them while these issues are addressed. We strongly believe in the national exam, and we think it holds the best future for our MFTs. Thank you so much, and we look forward to the continuing conversation.
Thank you, Kathy.
And our next request for comment comes from someone logged into WebEx as Roger Smith. Roger, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 2 minutes with a 15-second warning. You're unmuted.
Thank you very much. My name is Roger Smith, Chief Advocacy Officer of the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. Thank you very much for allowing this presentation to occur in time, and appreciate Dr. Bergen's presentation on this issue. AMFT joins with CAMT and urging that the Board of Behavioral Sciences eventually consider the adoption of the AMFTRB national exam. As stated by Ms. Atkins, this hinders the ability, having the California MFT only exam hinders the ability of California LMFTs to practice in other states, as many states only recognize the national exam. And it's something that we hear from a national perspective from other state entities and advocates on this issue. And it's not just a barrier for those California MFTs who are moving out of state, but those who are in state and remain California residents who practice telehealth in those other states and are not able to do so because they're unable to get licensed in a state without having passed the MFTRB national exam. Again, we, and for other reasons too, on adoption of the federal programs and other barriers. And again, like with CAMT and its letter, we do support the continued assessment analysis of any potential exam biases or any exam biases that exist with all mental health exams. And as this analysis continues, AMFT appreciates that the Board of Behavioral Sciences is looking at having discussion in the fall and winter and next year on this issue. And we hope for perhaps the eventual adoption of the AMFTRB national exam in California. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate and make these comments.
Thank you, Roger.
And this is the moderator. I do not see any further requests for comment. As a reminder, each time someone on WebEx clicks the hand icon, it will raise and then lower. So if you thought you raised your hand, you might want to click it again. Are there any further comments on the presentation? I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
And thank you again, Lois, for that presentation. We really appreciate all the information. And with that, I think we will take a 10-minute break. All right, thank you. We're going to get started, restarted. Our next item, agenda item is the executive officer's report. So Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So going over, starting with our budget, currently right now, the budget for this fiscal year is $13,593,000. And based on the last information provided, our expenditures are at $11.1 million for this year. And the board's fund condition currently reflects a 14.5 month reserve. And personnel, we did hire a office technician receptionist. Crystal Martinez started on July 3rd. She's doing a great job up there, so we welcome her. We did have one retirement and two promotions out of the board. So 2 people left us for promotions. Maybe we'll get them back later. I don't know. We'll try. So that leaves right now, we currently have 6 vacancies in the process of being hired. And we also are seeking a limited term position for our registration unit to help with processing those registration apps. I'm thinking by the next time, maybe I always say this, but by the next time in November, hopefully we will be at least only 1 vacancy or fully staffed, hopefully. So we keeps moving around. So you'll see all the data in the licensing report. For the last quarter, we were averaging around 30 days for the registrant applications, but it is busy season now, so that the current processing time is not reflected in there. We're probably at about, I think, a 60-day processing time, and hopefully we'll be maintaining that and not going too far beyond that. And additionally, the licensing unit, we have had a slowdown in those applications, but they're doing a great job, and we are hopefully going to reduce the amount of time. I think currently we're at about a 4-month processing time. Hopefully next time reporting, that will be completely reduced, or reduced quite, what's the term? Reduced, basically. I'll just say reduced. So we do recognize the importance of those processing times, and we're trying all that we can with the resources that we currently have. So thank you for your patience out there, everyone who is waiting to be processed. We appreciate your patience. The exam report, there was an average 81% pass rate for the clinical exams, 67% for LEP. What I've included, there's a lot of extra paperwork I've included with the exam report. Actually, before I talk about that, we do not have these school pass rates in there currently, or the pass rates for the law and ethics exam. There was a snafu with the report. For some reason, it was not bringing back what we needed. So currently right now, DCA's OIS is working on trying to figure out why that report is not working for us. So hopefully we will get that for you. It should be corrected by next board meeting. I have included additional information in the exam report. One of them is an ASWB update, and it talks about what they are doing in response to the pass rate concerns. So they've had community conversations to get an evaluation of how people are, what the barriers or what the problems they have experienced during the exam process. They've also, I think I've already reported on this before, they have a third-party psychometric firm that is kind of doing assessments and helping them through a process of looking at their exams. And I believe by the next board meeting, or I think in August or September, they were going to come out with additional information about what they've been doing and additional reports. So I will be looking forward to those and providing those to you at a later date. So the other thing that I've included in here, and I know I've probably talked to a lot of people about this, but the exam, the concerns about standardized testing and exams and pass rates, it's a big discussion. And I know I had talked about that we are going to visit this possibly at this meeting, but really it requires, I think, a platform all its own. So these discussions about the exams, we're going to be talking about them first in the licensing committee coming up in October. Just to keep the conversation going, though, we do have letters that were included that really describe some of the concerns that our stakeholders are having. So I hope you have had a chance to review those. Additionally, there is a letter from OPES, and they have offered some information about, exam validity and what the department believes, and additionally, kind of steps that they think moving forward. One of the things that they're talking about, which Kelly brought up earlier, was the diff analysis. And currently, right now, the board does not collect any demographic data on their exams, but that is something we will be discussing at the licensing committee. We have drafted some demographic questions, and the next step is to look at how we can possibly implement those. And once we do, then we will be able to do some sort of diff analysis. So we're looking forward to that and that discussion. So then the enforcement report, we have consumer complaints have increased. We had 496 during the last quarter. Convictions have gone down. We had 158 convictions in the last quarter that we reviewed. 21 accusations were filed, 9 statement of issues were filed, and we made 20 final decisions. And the number of days for a formal discipline to be completed is down, and it's at 369 days. And once again, I always like to state a lot of that times is not necessarily the board's control, but it's with the Attorney General. So, but we're all doing good, I think. 369 days is pretty good. Education and outreach. I always like to say we're at around 28,000 Facebook followers. We've handled CIC, the department's consumer information, oh my gosh, center, thank you, gosh. Consumer Information Center answered 3,000 of our calls. We responded to 24,000 emails. Additionally, in the works, we have Pathway to Licensure videos. These are videos I've been reporting on. We're close to being done. I think there's about 2 or 3 that we're in the final phase of reviewing. And I'm hoping in November we'll be able to present some of those to you. And this is, once again, these are videos that will help kind of describe the licensure process and how to get through that, and give the applicant some more information in a video platform other than just, reading the actual FAQs and stuff that we have online. Additionally, we have issued it's called 10 Tips for a Smooth Licensure Process. This was created by Christy Berger, did a great job. And it's a little quick sheet that kind of gives you an idea of what are the 10 most common pitfalls and how to make sure that you don't, in your application process, that you don't get caught by those pitfalls. So it's 10, I put that in there so you can see what that is. So it's 10 tips, and hopefully it will help some people out there to get through that application process. During the last quarter, we did 15 outreach presentations, and I'm happy to report that the Carl Peralta has taken over organizing that whole outreach events, and it's been doing great. They've been doing a good job of coordinating the presentations and making sure that schools and whoever would like a presentation, that we're able to meet up with them and provide those. And just as just always putting it out there, we're available to talk to your school, to talk to your organizations. You can just contact us, and we would be happy to work on presenting any information, really. Currently, right now, what our presentations consist of are talking about the application process and how to get through, but we've done other things too, such as talking about the enforcement process to give highlights on that so people understand the whole enforcement process with the board. In our organizational development, we've had 25 updates to the Breeze system, and we have 16 that are waiting to be completed. We've been working with the Organizational Improvement Office, with DCA's OIO office, and they have finalized the draft of the, what they've done is we've done a review of all our processes within the board, the administrative processes. And we've identified areas that where we can improve upon. And so I will be presenting that once we look at it and review it. We'll be presenting the final report to the board in November. And that'll give us kind of a game plan of where we want to look at making some changes to the actual processes, administrative processes in the board. So we're excited about that. Melissa gave us an update on the DEI, what the department's doing with DEI. We are going through the process. You may have seen your email. Please check that because we are going through a mini DEI planning session for our strategic plan. That is based upon a governor's request that we look at how we are incorporating DEI into our policy decisions. And so we're really basically going through the strategic process again, doing an environmental scan, but really the only question, there's only a couple questions on there. So it's what we're saying is a mini kind of strategic planning process. So you will, the board members, I think you will be interviewed, but there's also the actual email that was sent out. We will be pushing this out to social media. I would please ask that you stakeholders, send the request on to anybody you would like. We'd like to get more voices in there. And it's really looking at how you think the board, maybe giving us ideas on how you think we can incorporate DEI when we're making our decisions or in any of our processes. So in November, I believe we're going to incorporate that into our November meeting. There's a lot of November meeting stuff here. Sorry, might be a big meeting. So we are going to have a mini strategic planning session with the board members, and that will be a public event too. So you can come and give us your opinions on that. Strategic plan update is there for your review, and we keep making strides on meeting some of those objectives. And really, questions now? Yes.
Steve, I have, excuse me, two quick questions. One of them, you said the ASWB is going to give us an update or something on what they're doing next August. That's a year from now. Why can't they just give us a mini update in November?
No, I was there. So they've been doing a lot of work with the community conversations with their third-party psychometrician. They're reporting, hopefully it's this August. This August, they're looking at, drafting more additional information and reports. So I'll be able to update you either at the licensing committee and in the November meeting on more of that.
Okay, and my other question is, you just mentioned very quickly that consumer complaints have gone up, and I'm wondering if you can tell us, are they specifically about one specific thing? What are the numbers like? Do they tell us anything that we need to know?
I honestly can't speak to what the increase has been or what they actually are surrounding on those consumer complaints. I know that's something that we're looking at, eventually kind of reporting more on that, but we do keep an eye on that. But right now, I can't really honestly speak to exactly why the increase. I don't know. Do you have any?
Just real quickly, the consumer complaints, they fluctuate from period to period. So like there isn't a specific reason why it's increased for this past quarter, but it does fluctuate from just time to time. So, but we do keep an eye out if there is anything specific that's coming out that we might possibly need to look into.
Wait, but is it a noticeable increase, and is it any particular subject? That's what I'm curious about.
I don't think it's not an increase that we're concerned. I mean, it's just a fluctuation over the quarter. I don't think it's not like we're all of a sudden getting a flood of complaints. Yeah.
So, in reference to OPS's letter, which you cited, which is on 15D-9 of the agenda documents, Dr. Linser writes, "To claim that examinations are racially biased is concerning and misleading. That is an interesting take on the research." That's a rather interesting take. She goes on to write, let me see. And I just want to I want to get this correctly because I think she mentions anxiety. Oh, no, wait, it's on 15D-10. Finally, it is possible that systemic societal factors such as longstanding educational inequities could result in test anxiety or insufficient test-taking preparedness. Yes, that's the point. That has been the entire point. It seems to minimize the entire systemic inequalities, which have historically been invested, inured, part of standardized testing. In fact, the National Education Association has an entire website dedicated to this called The Racist Beginnings of Standardized Testing. What an interesting take on the discussion that's going on now regarding the racial disparities in the ASWB exam. What utter minimization. I was quite surprised at this letter. I was shocked at this letter. But what an interesting take from an office which cannot collect racial demographics to say, our exam is fine. At the very least, OPS could acknowledge that racial bias in standardized examinations is an issue. And I know this has nothing to do with you, Steve, but it's part of the executive officer's report. I look forward to this discussion in the licensing committee.
No, and I think that's what we really are going to be addressing more of that. And I know, I mean, I can't speak for OPS, but I don't, they recognize, and I don't think it's they're not discrediting or the issues or the concerns, I think. So unfortunately right now, since I did put in my report, it's not going to be, up for discussion too much, but we will have that forum though in the licensing committee. So, and we can get more of that and actually give OPS more of a voice too. So I know you have 2 minutes today, so, but they can, so just once again, yes, we're gonna, and it's like I keep saying, this is a long conversation. I mean, this is not even one committee conversation. As we get into it more, I mean, it's going to be a long conversation. So,
I don't know if you're going to talk about this later when you go over the strategic plan for the year. For the diversity, equity, and exclusion initiatives, like how are we measuring effectiveness other than like we did this and we did that and we put this committee together? Just wanting to know more of like how is it actually influencing, right, the board, and how are people experiencing the trainings? Like, is it actually making a difference?
and that's a good question. I don't even know how to measure that. But I think definitely with the report and what the department is doing, we can provide a little bit more information on how they, are looking at that and seeing what seeing how they're making strides forward. So we can look at that.
John Sovek, LMFT. Maybe a direct question about like some of that strategy work. I know that the last time you had talked about the 10 tips to licensure piece that was going to put out, there was a suggestion from the board that it be a multilingual document and available in other languages. So has something like that actually been implemented and available for distribution along with this English language version?
We do have one publication that we have in 12 different languages, and that's about the consumer brochure that we put out But I think that's actually with the department's request to translate that into Spanish, at least. I think that definitely is something that we're going to be looking at. I wrote a note down on that. So
Okay. Because there was a specific suggestion last board meeting when this had been brought up that this is going to be released, that it be in multiple languages. So going
Oh,
with
okay.
Ms.
Sorry.
Ortega's comment, it's just like, great.
Yeah.
And is action being taken on that? And we can now say, yes, we have it in multiple languages. That's a real efficient way to say, yes, we are responding in real time to these suggestions and actions that the community is requesting of us.
Yeah.
And then on a lighter note.
Duly noted. Duly noted. And thank you for the suggestion.
Not a suggestion.
Well, yeah, no, I know. Okay.
A lighter note, I just really, really want to publicly recognize the work that Andrea Patrick and the group who's doing the social media side is doing out there. It's amazing the amount of growth that's happening, but something that I had reflected to Steve, and this is why I wanted to bring it up publicly, is there are therapist groups on social media. And within those things, people are asking like a California question about licensure or something. And the buzz in the community is saying, oh, go to the BBS Facebook page. They're really good at reacting. There's lots of information there. And I think that's a huge step forward. And I just wanted to commend the work that Lisa started and that Andrea has been following up with and the growth that's happening there. And that our stakeholders are saying this is a really amazing place where we're getting communication and we're seeing a real BBS, not just this place in Sacramento that never answers our phone calls or emails. And I think it's really powerful, the work that you're doing out there. So I want to just put that out.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Any other questions or comments from the board? All right. We take questions or comments from the audience.
Good afternoon, Kimberly Wormsley, NASW California chapter. This is a bitter moment for me as a LCSW, an executive director, a woman of color, particularly of African-American heritage, who once was a part of the outrageous 45% of African-American interns who did not pass the exam. It took me 3 attempts to pass this test, despite my 13 years of proven clinical expertise. It wasn't until I hired a tutor who had to shift my mindset from from a culturally relevant perspective and an inclusive perspective to a Eurocentral means that I was finally able to pass this test. Yes, my clinical tutor told me, Kimberly, the only way you will pass this test is if you approach the questions and answers selection from a perspective that is Eurocentric. This is disheartening. The history of this country's cultural and racist bias is beyond disturbing. History has a way of repeating itself time and time again. When will we come together as the largest state in this country to say enough is enough? The staggering data and current reports surrounding the ASWB test requirement, this needs immediate attention. We are in a state of an emergency as it relates to mental health in real time. Families cannot find providers. This is not only a grave injustice to these individuals, but a clear violation of the principles of equality, diversity, and social justice that we as social workers hold dear. The NASW firmly believes in promoting an inclusive and equitable society where everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. We firmly oppose any form of discrimination, racial bias, or unfair practices that hinder the professional growth and advancement of any African-American social worker.
15 seconds.
We call upon the DSA to take immediate action to ratify this situation. We cannot wait for another crisis to deal with these barriers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ben Caldwell, LMFT. Thank you for addressing and for committing to continue the conversation about clinical exams. If you haven't already done so, I would ask you to read through the resources linked in my letter. The data at this point is clear and convincing. Clinical exams add a layer of racial and ethnic disparity in the licensing process. Meanwhile, there is no data, none, that indicates that clinical exams actually tangibly protect the public, and significant reason to believe that by restricting the population of licensed mental health professionals, they do the opposite. Simply put, clinical exams do not make our professions safer. All they appear to do is make our professions whiter. I believe that's inconsistent with the board's mission. For today, I hope that you all will light a fire under OPES to start testing for differential item functioning on BBS exams like yesterday. When I've talked with folks who know more about the testing world than I do, they've been shocked to learn that we've been doing high stakes testing in California for decades now without even this minimal protection against exam bias. It's a significant failure, and it's meaningfully inconsistent with foundational industry standards in testing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Danziger, AMFT. There's no evidence that this test does what it was intended to do, which is to protect the public from dangerous and unethical therapists. All it does is the complete opposite, which is to keep qualified therapists such as myself, which are doing very good and effective work in the field, from becoming licensed. This exam, in effect, is a damaging barrier to our profession, and at this time, our professional assistance is truly critical, as so many people need mental health and counseling and support, and post-COVID, with skyrocketing amounts of mental health and substance abuse assistance desperately needed. Thank you.
Hello, John DeLine, MFT student. Apart from the fact that all standardized testing comes from scientists who created a lab of eugenics, there's no way that, anyway, besides that point, we're in a crisis for marriage and family therapists. The first year of the pandemic, I lost my therapist when I needed them the most. It's one of the reasons I'm becoming an MFT, and I feel like right now we need to have action, and I propose that for maybe a year or two, we get rid of the licensing exam so that we can fill the need of all the students, all the parents, and all the families that need therapy because of the collective trauma of COVID. So even if we bring it back, I feel like we need to do something now to help people, because the need for mental health services is only going to increase as we try to build the society after the effects of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? All right, moderator, would you open the line so we can have comments from our remote audience, please?
We've opened up the WebEx Q&A and public comment session. If you would like to make a comment, you may click on the hand icon in order to raise your hand. You may click on the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, and our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 2 minutes with a 15-second warning. Our first request for comment is from Kathy Atkins. Kathy, I'm going to send you a request to unmute. You're unmuted.
Hi, Kathy Atkins from CAMF. I just wanted to thank the board and BBS and commentators, public, for all the comments made and the passion felt. As indicated previously, that CAMF is supporting and advocating for a change to the national exam, and recognizing, as I said, that exams are imperfect and stand to improve, be it national, California, or, many of us have taken other kinds of standardized exams, and there is, appears to be inherent bias, and finding ways to address these while there are exams. 20 years from now, will there be exams? 10 years from now, I don't know. While there are exams, and there are exams across the nation, that is the standard at this point, while we use that system to hear the feedback that the board is getting to improve the exams, to hear how to limit as much as bias as possible while we do have exams and we are in this kind of licensure program. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our next request for comment is from Kimberly Miller. Kimberly, I'm going to send you a request to unmute and you'll have 2 minutes. You're unmuted. Go ahead, Kim. There you
Hi.
go.
Thank you, board, for bringing up this very heated issue. I have to say that it's been a very heated latter part of the meeting. However, I really support what Ben Caldwell is saying and Kimberly about the the equity, the diversion, equity, and inclusion, which is what's been a huge thing. And I really hit on the equity part because it doesn't seem like we're really capturing the equity part. I think that, this is really a serious crisis, and there's so many of us that are spending countless hours and time to take the test. I can say as a consumer that I can't even find a therapist to deal with anxiety myself from the trauma that was suffered in my former job. Due to all of the overwhelming high caseloads. And people are leaving the profession. And I hear it all the time. And one of the places that you could look at from social media, and I don't know if you guys are looking at it, is the BBS Exam and Study group on Facebook. They're voicing their views, and it really should be looked at because, like Ben, he is really in touch with all of us on the MFT and the ASWB side.
15 seconds.
And I'm actively, constantly informing participation to these meetings and to voice their views to you. And it doesn't seem like they feel they're getting their voices heard. And
2
that's,
minutes.
I just hope that Ben and Kim continue to put the pressure and that we continue to fight, because the ASWB is very blind or doesn't care. That's the bottom line. And other states are starting to do it, get rid of the exam, and they're understanding the need. So we really have to get this figured out. Thank you.
Thank you.
And our next request for comment is from call-in user 6. Call-in user 6, I'm going to send you a request and you can use *6 on your keypad to unmute yourself. And you're unmuted.
Hi, my name is Elise Enter. I'm an AMST who recently submitted for application for licensure. I submitted, I think it was June 6th that it got put into process. And I definitely understand that there's a lot of delay at this point. I think that it was 4 months is what we're looking at this juncture. And my request at this point is, like, I understand that it takes a while to review, but I've already paid like $500 to apply for licensure. And I'm going to have to pay to upgrade the license once I pass the exam. And I'm wondering if there's any way to start a process where when somebody applies for licensure, they can do a freeze on that date for their associate renewal, at least until they've taken the exam once. Because it's like, I'm going to end up having to pay 2 more fees before I can even take the exam. And I just think, like, for people who are struggling and we already don't get paid a lot as associates, it's just really difficult. And it puts a lot of strain on my family personally, and I know I'm not the only one, there's been a lot of stress and frustration voiced in the social media groups, which is great. We have a lot of support in there. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to comment on that, and I appreciate the time to do that. So thank you.
Thank you.
And our next request for comment is from Paige Clark. Paige, I'm going to send your request to unmute, and you will have 2 minutes with a 15-second warning. You're unmuted.
Good morning. My name is Paige Clark from the California Alliance of Child and Family Services, which represents over 160 nonprofits throughout the state. Since the publication of the ASWB exam passage rate data last fall, we've been working with our nonprofit members to explore the barriers to licensure, including the barriers posed by the exam and exam processes. So we are proud to announce that we recently finalized a paper describing challenges and recommendations, including waiving retesting fees, releasing disaggregated test data on a regular basis, and increasing the transparency around the licensure process, which we're excited to hear that the board has already begun taking action on. We deeply appreciate the comments of our colleagues in today's meeting. We thank the executive officers and the board for the attention to creating more equitable licensing processes, and we really look forward to the upcoming licensing committee meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I do not see any further requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
I do appreciate the robust conversation that we've had, and this is clearly a very passionate, topic. And so, we at the board will continue to do our due diligence to make sure that we move forward and create what we need to create to make this a better process. All right, thank you. Next on our agenda is we're going to do that or 1 second.
So Roseanne.
Okay.
maybe pushing the presentation. Oh, what was your suggestion?
No, we're gonna push.
Let's hold off for the legislation presentation, put it to the end, and then we'll begin on the next. Okay, regs.
Excellent. So we're going to postpone agenda item 16 and move on to agenda item 17, which is the discussion and possible action to initiate a rulemaking regarding proposed changes to enforcement regulations on professional conduct, citation factors, amount of fines. Christy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Sorry I couldn't be there today in person. I have a cold, but feeling good enough to present here. So for this item, we have some recommended revisions to the California Code of Regulations related to unprofessional conduct, as well as citations and fines related to confidentiality. So for our unprofessional conduct regulations, what we are doing is just simply removing language that duplicates the statute, so it's not necessary. Those amendments are shown in the attachment. And then the next one is adding a reference to the Confidentiality of Medical Information Act, which is in the Civil Code, and it specifies the amount of fines that may be levied for disclosing confidential information and the factors that must be considered when levying a fine or issuing an order of abatement. Our regulations define the factors that the board must consider in assessing a fine or issuing an order of abatement. And so this proposal would add language to this section that requires consideration of the factors in that Confidentiality of Medical Information Act. when there's a violation. And our regulations define what a citable offense is and list the amount of fines that the board may levy for unlawful or unauthorized breach of confidentiality. So this proposal would just add language from the Confidentiality of Medical Information Act that references those fines that are in that section. So in other words, we have to consider the factors in this other section of law. And just for clarity, we want to reference them in our regulations so that the full picture is there. So we recommend that the board review this text and decide whether to approve it as written or to suggest changes. And after review and discussion, we've provided some possible motions. So I'll go ahead and open it up there.
Thank you, Christy. Do you have comments or questions from the board? No? Okay, great. Do we have a motion? Oh, Christy, did you want to recommend what the motions were? See it? I'm sorry. I apologize. Where am I at?
That's okay. Do we want public comment first, though? Or am I?
Right.
Excuse me. Good morning. My name is Christy Shilge. I'm Regulations Counsel for the board. So I haven't met all of you, but I've been assigned to the board to assist with regulations. I've been with the department since 2000. I just want to clarify, if there are no issues with the text, we're recommending motion A. And I would recommend doing the motion up front so that you don't have to take public comment twice. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. I appreciate that.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
John Sovak, LMFT. I'd like to move that. Christine, do you need me to read the whole thing or can I just say motion A? Okay. Approve the proposed regulatory text as presented in the meeting materials and submit the approved text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review. And if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the text and the package, and set the matter for a hearing if requested. If, after the 45-day public comment period, no adverse comments are received and no public hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulations for Title 16 California Code of Regulations 1845, 1856, 1881, 1886.30, and 1886.40.
I'll second that motion.
No.
Are there any comments from the audience? Are there any comments from our remote participants? Moderator, would you open the lines, please?
Thank you. We've opened up the public comment feature on WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment on the motion, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment and click send. And our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments on the motion? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Are there any additional board member comments? All right, thank you, Christina. Can you please take the vote?
Dr. Annette Walker? Yes. Susan Friedman?
Yes.
Max Disposti?
Yes.
John Sovek?
Yes.
Wendy Strack?
Yes.
Chris Jones?
Yes.
Kelly Ronasinghe?
Yes.
Abigail Ortega?
Yes.
Eleanor Uribe?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is the discussion and possible action to initiate a rulemaking regarding proposed changes to enforcement regulations, uniform standards related to substance abuse and disciplinary guidelines, quarterly report form 16 CCR 1888, uniform standards related to substance abuse and disciplinary guidelines. Chrissy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So the uniform standards related to substance abuse and disciplinary guidelines provide standards and recommended guidelines for the use of those involved in the disciplinary process. This includes administrative law judges, respondents, and attorneys involved in the disciplinary process, as well as board members who review proposed decisions and stipulations and make final decisions. The uniform standards related to substance abuse is based on uniform standards that were created in response to some legislation that required the Department of Consumer Affairs to establish the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee and develop the standards for the purpose of addressing the increasing problem of substance abuse in the healthcare professions and to address inconsistent standards among licensing boards. Those uniform standards must be used when determining terms and conditions of probation for respondents with a violation involving alcohol or drugs. So the uniform standards are the first part of that publication that's incorporated by reference into the regulations. And then we have the disciplinary guidelines portion of that document, which has penalty guidelines that identify the range of penalties that may be imposed for different types of violations. It has model disciplinary orders, which provide language for proposed terms and conditions of probation, and then board policies and guidelines for various enforcement actions. The quarterly report form is also incorporated by reference into the regulations, and it's required to be submitted by probationers to keep the board informed of their compliance with all probationary terms and conditions. So I'm going to go over the major changes, but the attachments do contain the entirety of the proposed changes. As I'm going through the memo, there are, if you're looking at the print memo, the page numbers, so there's two sets of page numbers when you're looking at meeting materials. That's the page numbers within the packet, but because this is a publication of on its own, it also has page numbers. So if you're looking for a page number that's referenced in this memo, it's the one that's on the left-hand corner of that document. So we have amendments to a section that's in the regulations, which is section 1888, which contains those documents incorporated by reference. So the proposed changes to the text of section 1888, which is in Amendment A, simply clarify that a violation involving drugs or alcohol is presumed to be a substance abuse violation rather than what it had previously said, which just a violation is a substance abuse violation. So just a kind of a small change there. The new language would further clarify that if the licensee does not successfully rebut that presumption, then the uniform standards shall apply. Previously, it just said if they do not rebut the presumption. This language, as well as a little bit of clarifying text, is also included in the introduction to the uniform standards document. That introduction also provides information about how the uniform standards are applied, and then it also talks about that the board's standard and optional terms of conditions of probation also apply to each case. So in the uniform standards section of this document, again, it's derived from the DCA uniform standards. So there are there's really kind of big limits on the types of changes that can be made to this portion, but we can make some clarifying changes and things that are not substantive. So one of the things that we did is to specify that tolling cannot be granted after a positive test result is received or if the respondent's license has been suspended. And it also incorporates some changes to the DCA uniform standards that were made in 2019. So that's the uniform standards portion. Then we are going to move on now to the penalty guidelines. So the disciplinary guidelines section of the document. So starting on page 16. So we are proposing to add to the penalty guidelines, engaging in sexual orientation change efforts with a patient under age 18. We had legislation that made it unprofessional conduct to engage in any sexual orientation change efforts with a patient under 18. And the recommended amendments would add minimum and maximum penalties in our guidelines for this type of violation. And the Policy and Advocacy Committee discussed different possible minimum and maximum penalties, but after discussion, recommended outright revocation of license due to the severity of the harm that sexual orientation change efforts have on patients. The next items that we're proposing to add to the penalty guidelines. So now we're skipping to pages 32 and 33. These sections pertain to records, reporting, and investigations. The board added 4 unprofessional conduct provisions based on the DCA's Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative and pertain to board investigations. So those include failure to provide records or a failure to cooperate in a board investigation. So again, looking at adding minimum and maximum penalties for each of these provisions, and staff used as a guide a selection of penalties pulled from existing violation categories for general unprofessional conduct and general violations of the law, of the board's law by licensees and registrants. The next item that we're proposing to add to the penalty guidelines, and this is an optional, this would be a new optional term of probation, which we're going to discuss the specifics of that. Oh, actually, no, sorry. We're not going to, this is where we're going to discuss it, sorry. So this is a new optional term of probation that would require, if the board so chooses, the probationer to attend a recovery support program approved by the board. One example of that is Alcoholics Anonymous. The board currently does sometimes require attendance as a term of probation, even though it's not currently included in the guidelines. So the proposed language for this term is, we are going to discuss that later. Sorry, I did remember right. So we'll discuss this term a little bit later and when we talk about the model disciplinary orders. The other optional term of probation we're looking at adding is a law and ethics course. For the category of improper supervision of a trainee, intern, associate, or supervisee, suspension of license for improper supervision is currently a minimum penalty. The recommended amendments provide options for a lesser range of penalties. The discussion was that you have a licensee who may be a good clinician and therefore not a risk to clients. So you might not want to suspend the license. But you don't want to allow them to supervise. So that's the major change we're looking at there. The violations involving gaining or supervision of required hours of experience. Previously, this was combined with another violation. It was a little confusing. So we placed this into its own section, including the proposed range of penalties. So the amendments would strike the penalty that requires a registration to be placed on probation until licensure. And this is actually not necessary because probation automatically transfers to a license once a registrant is granted a license. It would also strike the penalty that requires the license to be issued on probation for 1 year. The remaining probation time may be more or less than 1 year. So that's not actually accurate. So I'm going to stop there before we go into the model disciplinary orders section and see if there's any feedback for what I've discussed so far.
Questions or comments from the board? No? All right, Christy, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the Lost my place a little bit here. 1 second. So now we're going to be talking about optional terms and conditions of probation. There are several terms and conditions that have some similar requirements. So we're looking at psych evals, psychotherapy, clinical diagnostic evaluation, and supervised practice. So all of those, what we're doing is clarifying, update, and strengthening the requirement for evaluators, psychotherapists, and supervisors of probationers, and clarifying the process for a probationer to submit a request for a specific evaluator, therapist, or supervisor, which would require them to submit evidence that the proposed professional meets the qualifications required for approval. There is a point of discussion here that we discussed at Policy and Advocacy Committee, and we wanted to discuss it with the board. Staff, as well as our legal counsel, recommend that an evaluator, therapist, or supervisor be required to have not ever been the subject of a disciplinary action against their license. The committee expressed concern that this was too restrictive and would imply that a licensee is never considered to have been rehabilitated. So we consulted with our liaison to the Deputy Attorney General's office, and they would be in support of this change to specify that they cannot have ever been the subject of a disciplinary action. And this is because the use of an evaluator who has had such an action could provide the respondent with a reason to question their credibility if their evaluation or quarterly report is unfavorable to the respondent. Legal counsel has also advised that all DCA boards and bureaus currently follow this practice. And in talking with our probation manager, they have confirmed that this is current BBS practice as well. So we wanted to bring that to you because it was a discussion at Policy and Advocacy, and we did some work after that discussion.
Christy,
Yes.
we do have a question. Hold on 1 second.
Sure.
So I just, Christy, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to follow on just to clarify a little bit about the legal advice. So when we go to court and we have the battle of the experts, so to speak, the courts do allow the opposing side to impeach the credibility of a witness if they have a history of violations. So even if we have the policy of allowing someone with a history to actually be an expert for the board, it can adversely affect your discipline cases because the court may, in looking at two opinions, give more credibility to the person who doesn't have a record. So that's why the recommendation is to have that restriction in your guidelines for experts that could be used to defend your disciplinary action with respect to a licensee. So that, just to clarify that, it's advice, of course, it's not direction to the board. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Go ahead, Christy.
Okay, so is there any discussion among the board members regarding this?
No, I think we're okay.
Okay. All right, and when we take comments from the public, obviously, if there's any question, we can do that. All right, so the next term and condition of probation to discuss is education that pertains to the evaluation, that pertains to the violation, as well as a law and ethics course. So these are two separate categories, but we made some similar changes. So the amendments would clarify that a course must be taken from a board accepted continuing education provider and specifies the process for a probationer to request approval of their proposed courses. The attendance of a recovery support program. The addition, we talked about this a little bit before, the addition of this term and condition would formalize the board's current practice in adding a term of condition of probation for recovery support when there's a drug or alcohol violation. So the The recommended language for this was developed by the Attorney General's Office and DCA Legal with the assistance of board staff, and it would require the respondent to provide information about the proposed program, including the location as well as the program's elements and methods for providing recovery support services. It would also provide guidelines for determining the type and frequency of the meetings that would be required, and specifies the acceptable types of proof of attendance. The next term and condition is abstention from drugs and alcohol, and submitting to drug and alcohol testing. The recommended amendments combine the, so previously there were two separate sections. One was abstain from drugs, one was abstain from alcohol, and obviously you want abstention from both when there's a substance abuse violation, and it was confusing to have two separate sections. So we combined them into one. And I also want to note that this item has some differences from the language that was approved by the Policy and Advocacy Committee as recommended by Christy, our regs counsel, after a re-review of this section after the meeting. So we added a phrase to the first paragraph, which talks about, that a probationer can take controlled substances as long as they're prescribed by a medical practitioner for a bona fide illness, and we added or medical or other medical condition, just to broaden that language a bit for clarity, and it's also consistent with our current practice. In addition, the proposal retains standards for abstention of controlled or illegal substances and alcohol. We had originally proposed to replace controlled or illegal substances with drugs, but we went back after the meeting because there was some concern expressed that drugs was too broad, because there could be, something as simple as a simple over-the-counter medication, or is caffeine a drug? So we wanted to, we talked about that just to be super, very clear about what we're talking about here. So the updated language is consistent with the uniform standards, which state that a testing vendor, so this is what the vendors test for, it says they shall be able to scientifically test for urine, blood, and hair specimens for the detection of alcohol, illegal, and controlled substances. So we're making that language consistent with the uniform standards. Even though uniform standards does refer to drugs during different parts of it, we need to go with what the testing vendor tests for, which makes sense. Also mentioning that uniform standard number 9 for a banned substance is not defined. So, but we feel that controlled and illegal substances will cover it. So, yeah, we can only define abstention in a way that's consistent with current testing protocols. So that's the reason why, or just wanted to make sure that you're aware that that language is a little bit different. Okay, now on to the standard terms and conditions of probation. The obey all laws section just provide a more accurate description of what it means for fingerprints to be currently on file with the board. The quarterly reports that probationers have to submit is incorporated into these regulations. And so there are quite a few changes to this form, and what it would do is we now added a thorough set of instructions that clarify requirements for the probationer to complete the form and how they are to submit it. We also made sure the form will match the terms and conditions of probation that are proposed to be updated in the disciplinary guidelines. And the other changes would better assist the board in determining whether a respondent has complied with all of their terms and conditions of probation. And we have an amendment to the cost recovery section that allow for a payment plan and specify considerations for determining the payment plan consistent with current practice. The next few are pretty quick, are the board policies and guidelines for adding recommended language for license surrender orders, recommended language for revocation of license orders. And then for reinstatement or reduction of penalty hearings, there's recommended amendments to the factors that the board considers when determining whether a reinstatement or penalty reduction is warranted. And that's to provide consistency with statute. And one of the pieces is, previously it said, considering the petitioner's attitude toward commission of the violations, and replaces it with a factor that is less, we feel is less subjective than the word attitude. So it now says whether the petitioner has demonstrated a recognition of wrongdoing. And then there's some additional language or wording for various order types related to this. So staff recommends that the board review that text and consider whether to approve it as written, which would be motion A, or to suggest changes to the proposed text, which would be motion B.
Thank you, Christy. That was a tremendous amount of work. We appreciate all that you've done for that.
Thank you.
Do we have any comments or questions from the board? Discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking. No, I didn't see your hand, Abigail. I apologize. Go ahead.
Just a question about the law and ethics course. Is there a minimum amount of hours recommended?
I believe that would be added, that would be determined based on what the specific violation was.
Oh, okay.
So it'd be different for each probationer, potentially.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Just a technical question, because I know language matters in this kind of stuff. Steve, currently CEU providers are not approved by the board, they're approved by the associations, correct?
30 hours.
They're approved by approval agencies, which are mostly, yes, the association. Yes.
So in the board accepted CE providers, is that something that needs to be languaged out in that section? I have no idea.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again? We were talking about the law and ethics course, Christy, on page 18-7-7.
Correct, yeah, so.
It says 30 hours.
Right.
Board approved. Sorry, I'll come back to your question, sorry. So
Oh, it does say 30 hours?
2 semester units, 30 hours of board approved coursework.
So that would,
Oh, okay, so that, right, but it could vary from, because these are recommended,
It's
disciplinary-
equivalent.
These are guidelines.
So it's an equivalency, but equivalent to 2
Right.
semester units is what the minimum is. Of course, there could be more ordered, but these are minimums.
Oh, yes, my apologies, that's right.
So I just want to make sure that you're okay with that concept if you want to discuss that issue or if you had concerns about that. That's existing, 2 semester units. We put the 30 hours in the parenthetical to help clarify if there were hours, you're adding up the hours for like maybe there's a quarterly equivalency that we're needed to do.
so are you saying, do we need to identify whether that's a CE, or John, are you going to specify? They're on it, yeah.
Well,
I think Christie's
wanted to
clarifying.
She's responding
Yes.
to my question about what's the
Yes.
minimum amount of hours for the law and ethics course. And so right now it's 2 semester hours or 30 hours.
Yeah, 2 semester units or 30 hours, because I know some programs are quarterly calculations. So we put the hourly in the parenthetical to help the staff and the respondent with the calculation of what would be considered equivalent to 2 semester units. But that's actually, anything that's not underlined is your existing policy. Anything that's underlined is an added concept. Anything struck is a removal of the existing policy. So right now you have 2 semester units as existing policy, but we were proposing to add 30 hours in the parenthetical so people wouldn't have to figure out the math of converting to the equivalency of a 2 semester unit subject. So is there a concern with that number at all, or are you okay with that policy?
And then do we provide them with a list of approved, like
No, they would provide
class?
us.
Huh?
We do not.
We do not, okay.
Well, the board accepted CE providers are listed in section 1887.4.3, which you can see a few paragraphs down has been added to this section so they know what section of the law to go to determine what's a board accepted CE provider. I don't know, does the board post its CE providers or just the regulation requirements?
The regulation
Okay.
requirements with who.
Well,
So
we
the-
have, we do have on our website, information about how to find a continuing education provider that's accepted by the board. And to John's question, we don't say board approved CE providers, we say board accepted. And that is language that we use. So it doesn't say that they're board approved because we don't, like you said, we don't approve them.
I had a question, Eleanor Uribe, LCSW. I just wanted to know if you're going to put the 30 units per semester, do you want to put quarter? Or is it?
I think.
Do we want to add quarter units?
Yeah, so they don't have to figure it out. What does it translate to in quarter?
I think we're also trying to allow for separate courses that you take together to get to the hourly requirement as well. So I think we're trying to be as flexible as possible and allowing all different methods of obtaining the education through different providers. And there's a lot of different ways that providers calculate it, and some of it's hourly, some of it's quarters, some of it's semester. So I'm not sure what the conversion would be if anyone knows to quarter from two semester. But the staff did the 30-hour conversion for that would cover all what we thought would be all instances.
I believe it would be 3. But
Is it
we look
3
at the
quarter?
continuing. I believe so. I'm going to check. Because we have, I know on our website, in our continuing education section, it does talk about the equivalency between those. I'm just going to open our CE brochure real quick. Because of course, the CE course, let's see here. Where is our brochure? Here we go.
I'm looking at 1887.5 of our regulations. It says one academic semester unit is equal to 15 hours of CE credit, and one academic quarter unit is equal to 10 hours of CE credit. So we have in our laws at least how to convert it. So the 30 that it should be 3 academic quarter units based on that.
So we want to add here the equivalency of 2 semester units for 3
quarter
yeah, it would be
units.
3 quarter units.
Correct.
And then leave the 30 hours in the parenthetical or remove it?
Yeah,
Leave it?
I think we should leave it.
Okay.
And then we would do that. Let's see, where's the one for education pertaining to the violation? I just want to check that one and see what we say there. So in that section, education pertaining to the violation, that's the one that we don't specify an amount. So we don't have to worry about it there. Just for the law and ethics is specified. Okay.
Okay, so then back to John's question. Sorry.
Yeah, so I mentioned before, it's We don't say board approved CE providers because we don't approve them. We say board accepted providers in the language. And that's because board accepted, we do specify who we accept. Our law provides that. So that is a acceptable term.
And so just a little bit of information from that section that we're pointing to in the guidelines, that the board accepts accredited or approved post-secondary institutions, approval agency, a board recognized approval agency or CE provider that has been approved or registered by a board recognized approval agency. So that's accredited agencies, an organization, institution, association, or other entity that's recognized by the board as a CE provider. And there's a list of several associations. CAMPT is one of them in that regulation. So people can look at that list and see, which associations offer approved CE and go to those associations or any of the other educational providers that are mentioned in that regulation, meeting those requirements.
Another question, how come they take the law and ethics course and then they can't use it for when they do renew their licensure? They have to, like, if it falls within the same year that they took those semester courses and then they need to renew, they have to pay again?
Right. So, I mean, this is standard across all the boards in the department. Usually when you are on probation for violating the law, we require you to do extra CE coursework to remediate the violation. So it's not just and I have to go back and look, whether you have dedicated CE requirements, I'm not sure. And you may have also some areas where you have, extra hours to play with, and it's for you to determine how to build your continuing education. But when you're in a situation where you violated the law, the policy is that the board needs to direct you in what areas you need to take education, and that is to be in addition to the regular continuing education requirements, because it's designed to remediate the particular ethical lapse in that case, that's separate and apart from general continuing education.
Okay. I mean, I get that that's how it's been done. And it's a little like that it doesn't even count. It's like excessive. But I heard that that's what it's just the way it's been done. So it will continue that way.
Well, let me just also explain that it's also to encourage people to stay compliant. Those people that have stayed compliant, they don't have to take additional CE. The ones that have not are the ones that have to do the additional education and training because the board has determined they need it. It's not just it's been done that way. It's sort of we're trying to remediate the particular conduct through training and education to that particular person's violations, not to the general population's continuing education requirements, but to this person's particular violations. I mean, you don't want to order a law and ethics requirement if it's not needed to remediate the person's violation. That's why it's an optional term and not something we require in every case. So that's been the policy and the reason why. It's not to be punitive. It's not to be excessive. It's to really try to make sure people understand, because they didn't, and that's why the board's ordering it, where those boundaries are, professional boundaries are, and where the ethical lapses occurred through education and training.
Yeah, I still don't get it. Because if you in 1 year took like 2 semesters or 30 hours and then you still have to take like another 3-hour law and ethic course because it doesn't count. I don't know. The number one reason why people come here for like that they want their probation removed is for like the financial burden. So it's just like more burden and like like, how much, like, does that really make a difference in how much more they get, like law and ethics?
Well, I think I mean, like we said, we don't, not everyone gets this. And if we are applying this, we do have a general concern that they may have not either have received during that 6 hours worth of training that they were supposed to get, or 3 hours, depending on where they are in the system. They maybe did not, have that knowledge after those coursework. So I understand, yeah, the cost benefit, but I think it's really addressing our concern that they may not understand the legal
I
guidelines
get
of
the
it.
30 hours. I'm not like, that's
Yeah.
not the argument. It's just like, does 33 hours make a difference, or 30, like, they have to do more on top of the 30?
No, I understand. I mean,
Okay, that's it. It's open for discussion, right? So we're having a discussion.
no, that's good.
Thank you, Abigail.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Board? Kelly?
So did we make a change or in that preceding section, or
Not formally yet. I was waiting to see if there were any other changes that were suggested, and then we would ask for a motion to make the change to the text and see if everyone else agrees with that idea.
because I was going to motion under option A, but should I not do that if there was a,
If there are changes, it should be option B,
okay.
where we would describe the differences between what's in the materials and what the members want to see changed. But I wanted to wait till we could do it all in one, and unless you want to take them one at a time, you can. No, I
we
see your face.
We can do it all in
What?
one. So with the adding the language about the quarterly.
Yes.
That would move us to option B then for a motion.
Yes,
Okay.
because you're deviating from what's in the meeting materials.
Exactly. Okay. Are we ready to move?
Yes, I'll make a motion to move it with option B, I believe that is.
You'll need to read it for us, Dr. Walker. Yes, option B.
Where did I get my-
Yes.
find- 1 second as I pull it up here.
I think it's page 7 of the memo.
Page 7 of the memo? What page? 7. Okay.
18-7 on your,
I can help you if you want.
Who said that?
I'd be happy to help you frame it if you'd like.
Would you like to read it for me since?
I can
For
if you
sake of
want.
time, I appreciate it.
Okay, so the motion would be to approve the proposed regulatory text as presented in the meeting materials, attachments A, B, and C with the following change. On page 46 of the guidelines, add the words or three quarter after semester and before units so that it would read, respondents shall take and successfully complete the equivalency of 2 semester or 3/4 units (paren 30 hours of board-approved coursework in law and ethics). In addition, submit the approved text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the text in the package, and set the matter for a hearing if requested. If after the 45-day public comment period, no adverse comments are received and no public hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulations for Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 1888, and the documents incorporated by reference as noticed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
all right. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. You have a second?
Eleanor Uribe, second.
Eleanor Uribe. Very good. Are there any comments or questions from the audience?
Ben Caldwell, MFT. I had expressed concern in committee about a couple of points of the proposed language, and I just really wanted to thank Christy for thoughtfully addressing those issues. I know there are places here where you have to sort of thread a needle as it relates to the particular wording. And I really appreciate the time and effort, Christy, that you took to do so. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Excellent. Any comments from our remote audience? Moderator, would you open the lines, please?
Certainly. We've opened up the WebEx public comment feature. Anyone who wishes to make a comment on the motion can raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon or click on the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send. And a call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Our first request for comment is from someone logged into WebEx as Leah Brew. Leah, I will send you a request to unmute your microphone and you'll have 2 minutes with a 15-second warning. And you're unmuted.
Through LPCC and former board member. So this is where I'm coming from as I respond to this. First of all, 30 hours does make a really important difference in a law and ethics class, and we've had students take it more than once in order to learn the material well enough. Secondly, in terms of the item 4 in that second section of 18, on abstention, I'm wondering if they can now do hair analysis instead of urinalysis in that first year because it's so expensive and quite embarrassing and punitive. And finally, the change for the last section, item 4, number 3, using the word wrongdoing, whether the petitioner has demonstrated a recognition of wrongdoing, I don't think that's helpful at all, whereas their attitude was something different, mainly because a lot of people will say, yes, I got a DUI and my blood alcohol level was 0.2, but then they'll say, but I'm not an alcoholic or I don't have a drinking problem. So I don't feel like that language is appropriate. I think they need to demonstrate that they take responsibility for the wrongdoing and have some insight as to what problems may have caused that, and then moving into their rehabilitative efforts to address those problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brew.
And our next request for comment is from Kathy Atkins. Kathy, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone and you'll have 2 minutes with a 15-second warning. And you're unmuted.
Kathy Atkins from the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I just wanted to reiterate Ben Caldwell's comments and of appreciation of Christy's proactive working with stakeholders on the input we all had. And as noted, it is hard to write these up and make everybody happy. So thank you so much for working on these and improving them, and hope you feel better. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
And I do not see any further requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Are there any additional comments from the board? Kelly?
Kelly Renessinger, public member. I just mentioned that hair testing is a developing science. The most common and reliable mechanism of controlled substance testing is urine. That is the one that is least challenged in litigation. And that's it.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from the board? All right. Christine, would you take a vote?
Eleanor Uribe,
Yes.
Abigail Ortega,
Yes.
Kelly Ronasinghe,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Wendy Strack,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Annette Walker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And thank you again, Christy, for all that hard work. And at that point, I think it is a great time for a lunch break. It is 11:59. We will return at 1 o'clock.